people in, so I'm not sure what that's going to involve, but that started, so conversations can follow depending on kind of what the scope is of what you want to do. The other thing is that the law school is a really strong ocean and coastal law program, including their journal, and C-Run is like so substantive. Just kind of wondering if there's some way we can partner, because if you can get maybe some of the information in there into law review articles, that's what the court cites to, is law review articles. So maybe, you know, working, kind of looking long term on how you can make an impact on the development of the law.
So who would forward that? Would that be somebody like yourself or Bob or Judd or
To the
to get that published in those articles?
yeah, I mean, it would just be a conversation to have with the journal, and it could be me, Bob, could be, you know, the authors.
Yeah.
So sure. Just
Oh, I meant like an attorney.
right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I guess we were going to talk. I can talk about this now. This is sort of blending in with agenda item 6.
Before you,
Sure.
this, I think maybe a question for Paul, and I'm sure we talked about it and I've completely forgotten, but when you mentioned budget, it made me think of it. Paul, when the invitation in August
It's work.
came forward for whether or not Mitchell wants to submit a supplemental request to the biennial, I'm assuming the decision there was not to, but did MITSC put something in for the supplemental?
No, you're correct. We made the determination not to pursue a supplemental request at that point, largely because we had just received the substantial increase in the state funding, which showed up in October. So no, we did not pursue a request for a supplemental.
Yep. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard.
Jill, I had a couple of things I was going to add but is that okay?
Certainly, please.
Just want to mention, speaking of the budget, we've spent some time updating and revising the budget, particularly since there were some variables that weren't clear earlier, but as those became more clear, we were able to update the proposed budget. So the budget documents you have today reflect those changes, and we're asking you to now adopt that as the fiscal year 24 budget. The other thing I wanted to mention is we've spent a fair amount of time dealing with health insurance issues. As you probably may know, we have a qualified small employer health reimbursement arrangement. And because of the new circumstances with the current employees, it has definitely raised some things that we had to research, and it raises the issue of whether or not we should renew that, or whether or not the commission may want to look at another way to provide help to the current employees based on their current circumstances. And just the decision on whether to renew that would be in January. The current plan, because of when it started, runs from March 1st. So the decision on renewing the plan will need to be addressed in January. That's what I had to add.
Thank you, Paul.
And as you're all aware, there are vacancies on the commission on the state side. So we've been following up with that. I also wanted to look at what the tribal terms were. So on page 12 of 36, I did a chart that hopefully lists everyone's contact information. And if that's not correct, please let me know. And I was also looking at what the terms are for the tribal commissioners. And so I think it was with the exception of Joey Barnes and Darren Ranko, the other tribal commissioners' appointments had expired. So and the tribes sometimes have different processes. So sometimes maybe the chief and council can decide who to appoint. Other times it may, require something more formal. Maybe it's just a letter from the chief. So, in a couple of instances, it was just a chief's letter in the past. So to try to expedite things, I did a draft letter for them, which sort of a template, and said, if you'd like to sign this and, reappoint this commissioner, here, this is something that you can use. I haven't gotten those back. I did follow up with Penobscot, and the tribal clerk sent me certified copies because that actually went by tribal council resolution. So we do have that for Darren and Bert. And Bert is going to be on the agenda in January. Council action requesting him to be reappointed. So that should happen. This is a little tricky because I think the statute contemplates everyone getting appointed at the same time. And, the tribal commissioners, their terms seem to be kind of just all over the place. And then now we have this new bill, which the certifications didn't come in, so it's really not effective, but talking about staggered terms. And then I looked on the Secretary of State's office to see what was there for a listing, and it's quite old. I'll say maybe it's like 2008. So sadly, several people are no longer with us that are still on there. And sometimes the terms are 3 years, sometimes they're just 1 year because they were completing someone else's term. So I guess at some point, kind of look and see if we can get everyone, get this coordinated in some way. So I would love to be able to help keep track of that and get people updated. Right now, it's kind of a quandary, which way to proceed.
Is there any way to align the tribal appointees? Or is that like even if, I don't know, like the furthest one out, if we had all of the others come into line with that and then reappointment after that point?
I think maybe when, if you get the new state commissioners, everybody, the state, I think is all gonna happen at the same time. And then we could ask the tribes, would you mind amending your appointment to start on this date and to go for 3 years?
Yeah.
And then with regard to the state commissioners, we did have a meeting, Paul and I, with Senator Carney.
Robert?
Hello. Hey, so if I'm understanding you right, Jill, you're saying, that we should line up with the state as far as our terms. I kind of have a problem with that because, I think that, with the tribes have been good at ensuring that our the tribal seats are covered, are filled. I think the only problem that we've really had is on the state side, and that's the one that needed to be staggered. But I think that, well, I don't know how it's worded, but I do think that when it comes to the appointments made by the tribes, I mean, according to the time that they were actually appointed, we have that 3-year term. But I don't know if that needs any real streamlining, because I think the problem that the state created when I know with mine and Darren's appointments, they try, I think they were talking about something to do with we have to go back to being in line with the way the state's format is, but I don't think so. I mean, that we see what the problem is with theirs, but and I don't think we need to get the tribes to be on that same situation. I think that the best way to do it is that if we go with in accordance with the date that each of our tribal commissioners are actually appointed, we go from 3 years from that. If there's any problem with that, I guess we need to address it then. But I really think that would be the best way to go.
Thank you, Robert. And I wasn't suggesting that we come in line with the state representatives. I was just mentioning that in terms of like having to keep track of when the commissioners are expiring, right? Tribal and or state, that we have like a set date that we know that's coming up. Say, for example, June 30th or whatever the date might be, that we have to have new appointments prior to that date.
If, isn't there something, I mean, I look at like on my phone, I have a calendar and I set the time, a certain date when, to notify me about something. I think, I wonder if that's something that our staff can put in there, I mean, use that calendar to, let you know when certain things are going to happen as far as the expiration of our existing commissioners.
Yeah, and
You know what I mean?
I'm not saying that either. I'm just thinking also about the statute and what that might say in terms of like appointments and terms and all of that. I don't know if there's anything specific in there. I guess we'd have to look into that, or maybe somebody knows.
Yeah, I don't think there was anything specific, Paul. You looked into that at one point, didn't you?
What the statutory language regarding terms?
Yeah, I mean, when it's gonna start. I mean, I know this.
It says 3-year terms that, as I recall, but I'm not sure it
No specifics.
is more
Okay, hold
detailed.
on. All right, Richard?
I mean, just going back to your report, I think the central administrative issue that we have is that all of the commissioners but one are all serving past our best sell by purchase date. And so in terms of an immediate challenge, it's getting back on track so that we don't have everybody serving past
Right.
our term, which I think you've mapped out a way to deal with it.
I think, what you're talking about, Bert, with basically tickling it, putting something on the calendar to say, follow up, this person's term is expiring, and to do that. And I think having this chart might help, because I have it right on there. We pointed a 4-year term, when that started, either do the appointment date or the expiration date. We just have to also be mindful, though, if you're filling someone else's vacancy, might not be for 3 years, might just be for a single year. We're not in that position right now, but just something to be moved. So I think
That's one of the. I think that's one of the things that we ran into, like with Darren, when I think he came in, John Banks retired, of course, and stepped down from the commission as well. And, Darren came on. However, shortly thereafter, we were being told that we need to get him reappointed, because basically, according to I think whoever the state person is, stated that no, he was only filling in a position that was vacant, made vacant. But that's what I'm saying. That's what I'm talking about. Is I think that we don't need to go along with that part. I mean, unless there's something specifically in the statute that requires that. But if that is the case, then that's something that would have to be changed, because I think it would be a lot easier if the tribes, once they appoint their commissioners, it goes 3 years from that. Because, as I said, the problem has never been with the appointments, the appointment timeframes of the commission, of the tribal commissioners.
Jill, can I follow up on Bert's comment? I would suggest at this point that we take this back, and we've had a good discussion about it. But as far as Bert's point, my recollection, without looking at the statute right now, is that the language about serving unexpired terms is in there, but it's permissive language, I believe, in terms of may appoint to serve the unexpired term. But I think we probably ought to just work this as a staff and come back, with a proposal for how to resolve it.
Sounds good, Bob. You want to continue? Or do you have?
He was, Paul, did you have anything more you wanted to add on the administrative transition report?
No, no.
Because I was just getting started and I wasn't on the bank accounts or anything. It seemed best to have Paul continue to oversee the financial matters, and so we're still transitioning. I just are getting on the accounts, I think, today, so we finally got the signature cards where they needed to be. So Paul is gonna give them the financial report.
Yeah, so
Are we ready for that?
Yes.
Okay, all right, so that will end the staff transition report and move on to item 5. MITSC financials.
okay, thanks. So you have a separate financial report. In the past, we were combining them with the staff report, but this time you do have a separate document, which is the financial report. You have the 3, normal reports that Pat Maller prepares. I won't go over everything that's in the written report, just as usual, I'd just like to call attention to some specific pieces. We have received, at this point, our full funding for fiscal year 24 from the state, and it is the increased amount of 268,500. That is an increase from the long-standing amount that had been 111,614. So substantial increase in the state funding and that's ongoing funding. And we have, since the last meeting, we have received the tribal funding that was outstanding from the last fiscal year. So that's been resolved. We're asking you today to approve, this revised version of the budget. We had a number of variables back in September, and but at this point, a lot of that has become more clear. So the budget that you have today reflects adjustments based on knowing more about how things were actually going so far in the fiscal year. So I don't know if you want to do that right now, but we would be asking you to review and approve that proposed revised fiscal year 24 budget. And I briefly mentioned the health reimbursement arrangement. And that's one of the variables that we were unclear about, because it still remains a variable in the sense that the commission needs to decide in January whether to renew that for the balance of this fiscal year and going forward. I would say in the big picture, over the years we've had the qualified small employer health reimbursement arrangement, it's been consistently underspent because it wasn't being fully utilized. But I think in the current circumstances with the current employees who have had to purchase marketplace insurance, I think we're going to find that there is more expense on the HRA, and it'll be more fully utilized. I do think the budget amount that's in there now for the health reimbursement arrangement is a pretty reasonable estimate of where it's going to turn out this year, in this fiscal year. But it will be, I'm almost sure it'll be more utilized than it has been in past years. And just briefly on the audit, we have made arrangements to have another audit done, and it's currently scheduled to actually be conducted in late January. The dates on the statement are a little bit off. Pat told me that after talking to the auditor, they decided Pat wanted them on consecutive days. So they've agreed to do the audit on 2 consecutive days instead of having time in between. But that's the only change there. It'll be done in late January.
January 23rd and 24th.
I think, I'm sorry, I don't know if it went to the 23rd and 24th or it went to the 24th and the 25th. I can't remember for sure, but it is now scheduled for 2 consecutive days. Because Pat felt Pat preferred that they do it on consecutive days. And that's what I have. The only, again, as far as acting on the proposed budget, I don't know if you want to address that at this point or, later on in the agenda.
Question.
We can address that now, but I think we have some questions on the floor as well.
Yeah.
Just 2 quick questions. So, Paul, in the handout, the proposed budget is the middle column. Title budget.
Yes, I'm sorry. I was going to specifically mention that on the profit and loss versus actual, so the year-to-date report. The 2 columns that constitute the proposed budget are the left column, which is the categories of expenses and income, and the middle the middle of the 3 numbered columns of numbers, which is entitled budget.
Yep. Okay, thank you. And the audit. So you're talking about the FY20
3. Yeah.
23 audit.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Robert Checkaway.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Paul, if I'm not out of order, or if I am out of order, just bat me aside, but I'm curious to know about the specific contracting cost of C-Run. You and I have talked about that informally before, and although it's not an individual line item, I have the impression that aside from the printing cost, the actual cost to the contractors in that whole study was around $10,000, which seems like a good use of money and fair value to me, if that's accurate. Do you know any differently?
I'm not sure that we've clearly identified that, but that sounds about right. I haven't gone through it, and identified exactly but I think that's pretty close.
And then if I may, just the cost to publish the hard copy is something like it's either $10 a volume. Rachel, you might be able to help on this. Do you remember what the printing cost works out to?
No, it's closer to like 25, 26.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the labor is relatively cheap. It's the materials that are expensive.
That's correct, and we've learned from this experience. Honestly, the end work product there, the book is, we've gotten great reactions to it, and it turned out to be a really good looking product. And we had not anticipated, when we started this, that we would have a book of that quality that we would want so many hard copies of. And so we didn't really anticipate that, and we didn't have money built into the grant for it, so that's probably the biggest variable in terms of what we've expended on C-Run is the cost of printing. And we haven't frankly we haven't printed as many as we would have liked to. We got some help from Hancock Lumber, from Kevin Hancock, who funded 100 more copies of it, which Rachel was able to take to Common Ground, and we still have a fair portion of those. But to really maximize that report, I've talked with Jill about just deciding to allocate some additional funds to get more copies of it. And Jill and Rafi and Rachel came up with the idea of turning it into an audiobook, which I had never thought of, and so that's another way that we want to try to expand the distribution of that report.
Thank you.
Interesting. What would that entail? Somebody reading.
Yeah, I think we have to hire someone to read it.
And I got that idea because through Adobe, there is a function that says you can listen to it. And so I listened to it when I was driving and that. The only thing is it's kind of choppy and then it occasionally jump over and tell you what the caption of the picture is on that page, and then it will come back. But I thought, but it really was engaging. It wasn't dry. So I thought, this would be great as an audiobook. And so the governor and the legislators could all be listening to it on the way to the state house, and tribal people, as they're driving around the state. So, I mean, it was somewhat facetious, but I was like, what famous person could we get to do it? And Patrick Dempsey came to mind because he's in Maine and he's got an interest in environmental issues and he's volunteered at schools and such. But that was before he got named sexiest man alive. So I don't know if he's in demand still. But even maybe one of the authors could be one of the narrators. And there's a number of quotes from tribal members in there. And so if they would be willing to read their own pieces, or I think we also have tape of them. Right?
I need to check with Tony about that, but I'm assuming that's how he got all those quotes to begin with.
So to have actual tribal voices in there as well.
Hmm.
It's still percolating and we have to figure out what a budget would be like.
Right. But even additional copies, like 100 copies would be $3,000.
Yeah, roughly.
About 2,500, yeah.
Anyone else on the screen that wants to comment on the budget? No? Anyone,
Bert is speechless for once.
anyone else in the room here?
That wasn't a challenge.
Maybe one question. Again, it's all recollection. Remind us again in the personnel budget, the capacity that is funded in this budget. In other words, what positions, full-time, part-time, just make sure we understand what is the position commitment in the budget.
Good question, Richard. And we went back and forth a little bit and ended up in the same place where we started. The budget was drafted originally as, for two employee positions, the, director and projects coordinator. So that figure of 133,000 corresponded to the salaries at that point. We looked at modifying it based on the fact that, because those were two full-time positions, and I was part-time at the beginning of the fiscal year, and Jill didn't come on full-time till October. So I had looked at maybe adjusting that number to reflect the fact that I had been part-time rather than full-time. But when I did the math, looking at the number of hours I worked and then factoring in that I was going to overlap with Jill to a certain extent, came to the conclusion that the original number was probably a pretty realistic number about the actual cost. So we ultimately, we did not change that salary number. We left it at the number that we had originally set.
So really what I'm getting at is to make sure we have an expression of intent. So the intent of the budget is two full-time positions.
That's correct.
Yes.
And that was what we had presented to, in our meeting with the state, to the appropriations committee, judiciary, and so forth. It's that the goal was the two full-time employees and money available to use contractors to do research.
Right. Thank you.
Paul, have you announced that your last day as an employee would be December 31st?
I guess I haven't announced it, but you just did. Well, it's in one of the reports, but yes, the plan at this point is that my part-time employee status will end December 31st. And Jill has asked me to continue beyond that, on, a consultant basis, fewer hours, but to continue for a while to help out as a consultant with transition. So,
We have some funding left in the Broad Reach grant, particularly to build the library. Having his corporate knowledge, so to speak, would be helpful.
So with that being said, Paul, we'd like to take this opportunity to thank you for the many, many years of service, both as the executive director, consulting lawyer, and whatever else you did back in the day for the commission. And
Former commissioner.
former commissioner.
former commissioner, that's right. So we do have a little gift here for you as well. But you have to come get it.
Well, okay, at some point.
No, we can mail it as well. But this is a basket made by Paula Love from the Penobscot Nation.
Well, that's,
Can you see it okay?
yeah, I appreciate that. That's great. Yeah, thank you
And-
very much.
And we'll set that aside and really, and personally, I just like to thank you a lot for all the conversations we've had over the years, and your dedication to the MITSC Commission.
Thank you.
I don't know if anybody else wanted to chime in. Bob looks like he wants to-
Paul, I've always told you, I thank you for what you do, what you have done, what you continue to do, actually. And, yeah, I don't even know what more to say. You've done an awesome job, and Chi Willie won for that.
Appreciate it, Bert.
Yeah, Chi Willie one.
Thanks. Thanks, everybody.
I've really enjoyed working with you. Thank you.
And thank you so much for having him overlap with me. There's no way this could have happened, I think, without him staying on, and he's been so helpful. Same thing. And Rachel is a gem, so you have to do whatever you can to keep her. She's just been awesome. So really great stuff.
The best thing I did during my term was hire Rachel.
Yeah, yes.
So,
Enjoy your retirement.
well, semi-retirement, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I appreciate all that. It's been, I'm just briefly, I never thought it would be 5 years when I started. It has now been 5 years. I was basically mostly retired when I took the job, and with things that were going on back then, I was looking at it as maybe a 2-year gig, and it's evolved into the 5-year gig. But I have to say this, and I don't want to put Jill on the spot, but I think you guys are lucky. You've got a really capable successor taking over the position. She has really jumped in. She has a lot of great energy and ideas, and I just hope you will support and empower her to be an activist director, because I think she really wants to promote the best interests of the commission.
Agreed.
Thank you.
Again, I just wanted to find a way to fit that in to our meeting today, and you provided that opportunity, so thank you, and thanks again. And in terms of, where are we?
The budget.
Item 5, the budget?
Do you need an approval for the budget?
Yeah.
You're not gonna like
I'm gonna ask if there's anyone that wanted to move the budget forward.
so
Richard, Robert,
what he said.
anyone have any comments, concerns about the budget? Here or online? It's hard to like negotiate, negotiate the meeting. If not, I don't hear any, is there any objections to forwarding the budget?
Do I have?
All right, hearing none, so moved. Thank you. Appointments and reappointments of state-approved commissioners.
So we already touched on this a little bit, the 4 vacant state positions. And we met remotely with Senator Carney, as I mentioned, and discussed the problems related to that. And she offered to contact Jerry Reed that very day. And so she did that. And then she followed up with us, I'm gonna say the next day or 2 days later, to let us know that Jerry had responded that they did have a couple of nominations that they were working on. And they hope to have those submitted in January of 2024. I'm still a little questioning the confirmation process. Senator Carney seemed like they could go ahead and do the confirmations right away. Versus Jerry maybe had a different understanding, thinking they were only doing judges. But that's something I can ask a little bit more about, unless you know, Paul.
Well, I think Senator Carney was pretty clear that they get the names, they're gonna move ahead with, confirmation hearings.
He didn't give us any names. He did mention that he had approached a young woman who, although she was interested, had too many other family and work obligations, so she didn't feel like she could take it on. I think you probably know who that was, but
Yeah, I'm not sure whether these things are confidential or not. I mean, I don't think the person applied. I think they were sort of recruited, and unfortunately, I made such an enthusiastic case for the challenges the commission face. I think I must have chased her off.
Scared away.
I mean, we don't need any more agitators like me. We need sensible people who can, show up. And this lady had, I think, 4 kids, the oldest of whom was 15, and next time I'll keep my mouth shut.
and I know the commission's already given some suggestions, right, to the governor's office.
Yes.
We can either go or not go with that. So Jerry also asked to meet with me, so on this topic and a couple of others. So that's set up for December 18th. Be meeting with him on that. I think we're going to talk a little bit about the collaboration project as well. And there was one, and then the symposium. So 3 topics to talk to Jerry Reed about. So at this point, though, I also asked, because of how he expressed that, whether our 2 existing commissioners would be staying on. I don't want to speak out of turn for you, Richard, but he said you were maybe not interested in being reappointed.
It is becoming a scheduling challenge to participate. Will be leaving my current position at the end of this month, but perhaps taking on another position. I don't seem to know enough to just retire and let it go. And so the scheduling issues may just become too much, but I kind of figure I'm already, in practicality, I'm really a little more than halfway through my 2nd term, just not appointed. So it's, as your chart shows, it expired in 22. So I mean, had been happy to continue and to particularly make sure we have quorum and we're able to move forward.
Thank you.
But if there are folks lined up and if the governor's office have new nominees and that type of, then I think, it will be difficult to commit to attending scheduling wise, but will be available and as a resource if needed, and happy to help out.
You can check out, but you can never leave.
Jerry also said that Bob Checkaway was interested in continuing, so his reappointment would be put forward.
That's one.
That's one.
I had I've scared off the lady. Or their mom.
I don't think I have anything more to say about that. Do you, Paul, want to add anything?
No, just look forward to your meeting. It's Monday, right? With Jerry Reed? Yeah.
Yeah, this month is going to
Yeah.
pass.
Jill, you mentioned a symposium.
Ah, that is actually, I think, the brainchild of Bob Checkaway, so if he wants to speak to that.
I mean, what is a symposium or what are we talking about?
What are you talking about when you
Yeah.
use the word?
The idea for this started, shortly after the governor's veto of the last major omnibus reform, which I think came in June. We've sort of got one effort at a symposium, which I started and is faltering. Now Jill is moving toward a different iteration of it. My original suggestion, and I think everybody was in agreement without much discussion after the veto, was why don't we put on a forum, symposium, panel, whatever you want to call it, exploring what I think the governor's veto message pointed out as issues that hadn't yet been thoroughly analyzed, which I took to mean largely the effect of the proposed reforms on the outlying Indian territories beyond the reservation. And Corey Hinton responded that, if not enthusiastically, at least very seriously. He rattled off a list of items that he thought might be attended to that, I won't say it took my breath away, but it was literally everything I've been thinking of. We discussed between the two of us, drawing in somehow the people who might be most interested in the reforms as they affect properties beyond the reservation, mainly landowners, forestry, people with commercial interest in the northern part of the state. And particularly my idea was that we might bring together a group for discussion during the summer and fall before the legislature got back in session. And I thought that during that period, we might be able to revive members of the task force from 2019, and particularly to draw on some of the people who had developed a huge base of knowledge from the task force process, including Pat Warden and Chris Taum. You didn't even know I was thinking of volunteering for that. And even Janet Stocko, who did such an outstanding job with the committee's research and analysis of the task force. I mean, we've now got those people who are highly skilled to begin with, very well schooled in all of the issues. And I thought, wouldn't it be great to get them all together? Unfortunately, once the legislature goes back into session, it's going to be impossible to ask state employees to appear as objective intermediaries on this. When I first approached Jerry Reed about this, he thought it was a great idea. But he didn't want to be sort of the counterpart or foil to Corey Hinton. However, he did, it said it's a great idea, law school and all that stuff. But he did suggest somebody who he thought might be able to play sort of the opposite pole to Corey, and Matt Manahan, who represents a number of towns in northern Maine and who represented them throughout the Penobscot River litigation and was a state commissioner back in the Jurassic area. And unfortunately, I could not interest him in that. His response was polite, but that his clients were so strapped for resources that they were not in a position to fund another academic exercise like this. I tried to convince Jerry Reed that he might be a good presenter. He said, no, once he's in an effort like that, it would just politicize it too greatly so that it would make it impossible to have an objective discussion. And I get where he's coming from. And with that, I got stumped. I could only think as far as sort of a point counterpoint or like a Lincoln Douglas style debate, one side and the other side. Once you say the legislature's back in session, there's a specific bill before the body, then you really can't ask Janet Stocko and the people in the AG's office to participate. So the number of people that you can play off there gets smaller and smaller. And I have not been able to press it beyond that. I think it would have been particularly helpful to have a wide-ranging colloquial kind of forum before the legislature's in session. Oh, and legislators, I thought they would make ideal attendees, and those who have been on the task force could make presenters. But now I think once it's back into, the legislature's back into session, we're not going to be able to have that kind of a forum that I agree with. However, I think there is as much public attention as has been given to the various reform proposals of the last few years. I think there's still a lot to be talked about. I think there's a lot of room for the proponents to ease some of the concerns that have been expressed by legislators, the governor's office, and so on. But I don't know how to take that next step, at least now that the legislature's in session. I think once they return, there will be a bill proposed, and then it will be a political discussion instead of an abstract legal one. But I'm glad to talk to anybody who wants to talk about it. And that's a roundabout answer to Zeke's question of what symposium are you talking about? I had envisioned that one. I think there's still, the issues are still very much on the table. It's just harder to get anybody to sit around that table and deal with them who isn't already dealing with them.
No, I was thinking that back in 1979, the law school actually put on a symposium and brought in a number of Indian law experts around the country. And they all gave, law review articles. And so you can look in the whole volume, it's dedicated to it. And Professor Robert Clinton, I think he might have been at the University of Arizona at the time, very well respected. And he thought that symposium made a huge difference. He thought that the state did not take them seriously until all these kind of outside people came in and said, yeah, these are viable claims. And, here's the reasons why. So I guess what I was thinking about, maybe if it goes with this, is I think the governor's veto message, and she said several times, she's very concerned about unanticipated consequences. Like, what's this going to look like with the checkerboarded land? And so I thought, well, maybe we could bring in someone, like I was thinking Felix Cohen's Handbook of Federal Indian Law is kind of like the Bible of Indian law. And so find the person who wrote that section and then how that's been negotiated. I'm trying to think of where that might be, which particular reservations where they had a lot allotments that are now tribal trust land, fee land, and other situations. So bring that person and say, yeah, here this is the situation in our state. This is how we've navigated it. And here are the tribal state agreements that we have that have made this work. A lot of times you'll see that around law enforcement reports. So.
I mean, part of my hope for symposium in particular would have dealt with the kinds of things that Native tribes are doing elsewhere, businesses they're operating, the kinds of enterprises that they're involved in, just so that people here in Maine could get a feeling for what the natives would do with a different legal structure. I'm not sure who we could get because, of course, we don't have that many people working locally. Well, no, we've got Passamaquoddy Maple and NEPSCO. And I'd love to hear more about those things, as well as what people in other states do.
I think it sounds like a great idea. Great opportunity to educate. I think that's what's needed.
So like I said,
I should have had Corey's only stipulation, what I remember, was that if we put on a program like that, that we have at least one part of it that is not pitched to lawyers. And I agreed with that wholeheartedly. I thought people who would be either good attendees or good presenters would include town officials and town managers in places like Arabasset Valley and Millinocket, because these people are already dealing with the issues on the ground and put some flesh on the stone.
I think some of the other things I want to talk to the dean about is just the general lack of teaching of anything law. I think it's offered once every other year. I think Kane teaches it, even though we have a number of native lawyers, former teachers. It's just not offered. And it also should be integrated throughout the curriculum. You know, it touches on every subject area. So I'm gonna
Especially because the law school now has a special interest in promoting legal services in rural areas. You know, it's not just Portland and Bangor, Oxford.
can come up in any situation, family law, those kinds of things. So, and then if you read the comments, like whenever they have articles in the Portland Press Herald about tribal issues, the comments below are just so ignorant. Yeah, I was trying to come up with another way to say it, but they're just like, don't give the Indians any more rights, or they already have what they should have, and those kinds of things. There's just this total, isolation that they know Indian law is it's situated in Maine, not against the larger context, and to see how different things are here. So it's just general educational outreach is needed.
And
So an
ironically,
enlightening of making sure people know that their responsibilities and not rights.
Kane Smith is a teacher at the law school, and he is one of the members of the American Law Institute who wrote the book on American Indian law. And I don't know if I can adequately express that to the non-lawyers, but that's like the people who write the ABI restatements are the the top of the peak. It's a tremendous resource to have somebody like that, be able to take advantage of it.
Sandy's gonna use.
Sandra?
Thank you. So are we just still discussing this, or like where are we going with this? Because I think it's a fantastic idea. But if we're just going to sit and talk about it and not come up with, okay, here's the plan. I work and live as a project manager, so I'm kind of already at that phase of, let's create a plan, let's create an agenda, let's determine a date and a location, and then put a one-pager out, and then maybe use something that's documented to sell the case, to try to lure people in to sit on a panel. Because I think it's a great idea, but if we're just talking about it, then I'll just shut up.
No, we are talking about it, but in our way, we're getting to take a next step. I think I should be relieved of responsibility as the project organizer, but I will be fully available to Jill or whoever wants to lead this forward.
Yeah, I think there's a plan being formulated, correct?
It's early stages.
Early stages,
And this has
yes.
been helpful so far because, I'm biased as a lawyer. So it's great to say, okay, we need, panels for non-lawyers, people who are working on the ground, those kinds of things. The other thing is that I think there's nothing worse than coming in and just hearing one speech after another. So if there's some way of, including some kind of experiential piece or something that will stick with people, I'd like to see that included.
So maybe we can put this on the next agenda.
Yeah, or
Yes.
if there wants to be a committee.
Yeah, my original idea was having people like town officials and forestry owners and tribal officials all around a big table in a multi-way dialogue rather than a series of presentations of bare texts.
Thank you. Thank you. So back to the appointments and state commissioners and all of that. I just wanted to ask if there was any questions and concerns or comments from our visiting audience. Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Our visiting audience. I was
very busy scribbling notes. Can you repeat the question? I apologize.
Just on, if you had, our discussion on the appointments and reappointments of state commissioners, if you had any, questions, comments, concerns.
Oh, no, I don't, it's totally, it's not within my purview. I mean, I personally, my own view personally, not speaking on behalf of the Attorney General's office, is that, I would like to see the commission to be, fully staffed, you know, to have all of the appointments complete. But that's completely out of my purview. It's sometimes challenging, you know, also because I think a lot of people who have experience or, you know, sort of like influence are sitting legislators, and that's not something that can happen. We can't have sitting legislators that are on the MITSC commission. So, and or even, you know, other state officials, or it just can be challenging to find appropriate people. Yeah.
Is that
Thank you.
In our rules in the MIA that you can't have a sitting legislator on MITSC in the city?
So it's more like a main constitutional issue where you have a legislator who's in one branch of government, like sitting on MITSC, who has sort of like a rulemaking authority, which kind of sits within sort of like another, it's not a legislative function, right? So and so having like state officials, it's just serving sort of like two hats and things like that, so.
And it may be particularly positions that appointments and positions that require Senate confirmation.
Yeah, so it's there's nothing in the MIA about that. And in fact, early on, in the history of MITSC, there were, you know, I think the IFW commissioner traditionally had been one of the state appointed commissioners, but over time, you know, there was, you know, further analysis that was done, and, you know, it was, you know, determined that there was a conflict of interest there. But there's no technical problem in the MIA about that.
Robert, Mr. Chairman, if there's anyone in the public listening on the live stream who has any interest in joining this group, no, people are laughing because it's very difficult,
Yeah.
unstructured, unusual position. But if you would like to know more about it, please call Jill Tompkins. Call me.
Or the governor's office.
Yeah. Governor.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So we will put something on the agenda for next time, and we'll move on from item 6. And move on to number 7, the review of the proposed MITSC work plan and staff activity reports.
Paul, do you want me to lead this piece or?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead?
Okay.
I can fill in.
What's kind of interesting is when I came on board, I was trying to get my arms around everything. Actually, during my interview, I asked you, I said, you've got 20 things on here. What's your top priority? And so that's what I wanted to see was what is everything that's on MITSC's plate, and, you know, is there a structure to it or a direction? So we did sit down and we were talking about, well, what are the buckets, and maybe it should be baskets that, you know, all of these tasks fit into. And then actually last night I listened to your last meeting, and it turned out that there was a request to reorganize a work plan. So we kind of came at it the same from two different ways. So the work plan starts on page 16. So this is just kind of the bare bones. And so very first thing is, you know, what are MITSC's statutory responsibilities or duties? And so those are, you know, the overarching is to review the act's effectiveness and continually review the social, economic, and legal relationship between the tribal nations and the state, and to make recommendations and reports. And then there's the approval of Indian Territory additions, and also promulgating fishing rules and regulations. I also heard mentioned that MITSC has responsibility for motorcraft on certain water bodies. Is that true? Yeah, I was I knew about the fish, I didn't know about the motorboats, but I will look for that. I don't remember where it was referred to, and I thought, I don't know if that's something that was.
It came up in Janet Stocko's
Okay,
presentation.
so we'll have to track that down, because that may be something else that MITSC has as a statutory responsibility. and then designating extended reservations. So those, just to my way of thinking would be the top priorities. And if there was something that came to MITSC, that needs to take priority. Also came up, there's a mission statement sort of on our website. Even though the statute, says what MITSC is about, this is almost more of a vision for more of like the spirit of what MITSC does, which is we envision a future where self-determination by the Wabanaki people and preservation of these cultures is valued by all, and the well-being of our tribal and non-tribal communities, as well as the land we live on, is promoted and protected through education and relationship building. So that was on the website. I don't know that the commission needs to formally adopt that. Was that?
Just to, might be slightly off topic, but since the adoption of 1620, the Holton Band of Maliseets fits alongside Passamaquoddy and Penobscot in a lot of the phrases. It's no longer just the boundary waters for Passamaquoddy and Penobscot.
Sorry, say that again, Zeke?
1620, the Mi'kmaq Restoration Act,
Yes.
includes Holton Band of Maliseet Indians now, for, I have it right here. Yeah, subject to limitations of subsection 6, the commission has exclusive authority to promulgate fishing rules or regulations on any pond other than those specified in subsection 1, paragraph B, 50% or more of the linear shoreline on which is within Holton Band jurisdiction land. Any section of river or stream, both sides of which are within the Holton Band jurisdiction land. Any section of a river or stream, one side of which is within Holton Band jurisdiction land.
And what are you reading from, Zeke?
The changes coming from 1620, which was the Mi'kmaq Restoration Act from last session.
Say it again, the big mouth.
Mi'kmaq Restoration Act, I think they changed it, that was originally what it was called.
Wabanaki Equality Act, I believe.
So it basically just brought the Holton Band and Mi'kmaq to parity with Passamaquoddy and Penobscot in some ways.
In terms of MITSC waters or just?
And it brought MITSC into this discussion.
Okay.
So, to bring it to a point, does that mean MITSC now has jurisdiction over parts of Meduxticate?
I believe that's what that means.
Wow, I'm glad I came.
We are.
Consider those updated amendments to this section.
It would require some updates to our, our bylaws and.
So that was the first section of the 131st.
Yeah.
So that went into effect, yeah.
Yeah, I think it officially begins in effect January 1st.
Oh, it does, okay.
I think so.
Coming.
November 24th
Well, yeah, I had a question.
November 20th,
of this year, November
yeah,
24th.
the 90 days after.
Okay.
It's actually 120 days after the close of the first special session of the 131st.
Right, right.
Some miscommunication whether or not Holton Band certified that on our end, but.
I've seen the certification.
Okay, yeah, so that's a good update. That's just only a few. The ink is just dry. Yes.
Mostly dry.
This is just an explanation of it from the lawyers. But yeah, this is just.
The statutory section for the regulation of natural resources on Holton Band jurisdiction land is section 6207-C of the implementing act.
I will confess that there was so much legislation trying to get my arms around all of it, and
Yeah.
things keep popping up. And so I keep having to add to the list. So please, point those kinds of things out.
It's like the whole Mi'kmaq Restoration Act, and it took me by surprise. We were working on our own stagger bill when that came in. Oh, we got another customer here.
So, and then we'll try to go on. So in
Yes,
in
please.
terms of kind of the focus areas, There's really like 4 baskets here. Generally, and this didn't really fit in any particular basket, is that we will monitor legislation that affects the nations or their citizens specifically, and will be available to provide information or give input. So do reports or testimonials, the commission sees fit. And then the areas would be education and outreach, natural resources protection, sustaining cultures, economic and revenue development, and improving government to government relations. So I guess I'll ask the commissioners if you think that this captures the major areas of concern.
Maybe the first time I've seen the whole work plan organized into separate sections, which is a good start, and I can't improve on it yet.
So we started to, so so basically, then what I did was I plugged in what I thought your current projects were. And so they fit under each of these. I think we maybe added a couple things that well, I know I was approached about, and perhaps other staff were approached about. So. And see, what I did next though, before I get into that, it was we did a progress report, kind of tracking the work plan. Do all that.
It's fine by me, if we have time.
So you can certainly read, there's an update, a report on each of the activities done under these various tasks, and it starts on page 16. And so both, so all 3 of us put in kind of what we've done under them. Would you like to have that whole report?
Well, I'm maybe not the whole report, but it's certainly a summary of what has happened so that people listening may be able to hear a little bit.
Maybe we should go through the report, Paul. I'm starting on page 17.
Yeah, we can go through the update sections of the report under each area. Yeah.
So we'll get into this a little bit further about the proposed process for responding to legislation. So how the commission's going to be able to do that in a nimble fashion. And then Rachel, do you want to talk about what you did with Common Ground?
Yeah, I mean, since the last meeting, you all knew I was going to be at Common Ground, and Daryl Gabriel Bridges volunteered to help at the booth, so we were there together for 3 days, and it felt like an excellent opportunity to talk to people, educate people about current legislation and our educational initiatives, and especially promote C-Run. We got more names added to the MITSC email list. I think we're in the 300 something people now are on that list. And then I guess later we'll be talking about C-Run.
You've been more involved with I was involved with the Wabanaki Studies Bill 20 years ago. So, but you've been more recently involved with this, and it's actually LD 1642.
Yeah, so that was carried over, and I think, I mean, there's been a group of people meeting about that, primarily made up of the groups that co-authored the report. And I think we're about to resume those conversations because there's an effort to make sure there's going to be support from the Department of Education and Maine Curriculum Association.
16, what now? Sorry.
1642.
So yeah, we're actually trying to schedule a date to resume conversation about that and try to really hone in on what the writing is gonna be for that bill.
The education committee tentatively chose a public hearing date for 1642.
Oh, really? Can you know the date?
January 9th.
Is it?
Oh,
January
right,
9th
yes.
at 1 p.m. is the public hearing on 1642.
Right.
Mind if I add something?
No.
So I took a look at that, at the bill, and one of the things that the bill provides is that Says that MITSC is to provide the Wabanaki Studies Commission with quote, staffing, assistance, and support. And then basically, I think left it up to the commission to try to find that money. I talked to Paul a little bit about that, and what the concern was.
Is that draft language in the packet?
No, and not that particular bill. We can look it up, but, so I just thought, wow, how are we gonna do that? Seems like they really should have their own staff. This is gonna be an ongoing process. I mean, we see what happened in the last 20 years. And there was no one responsible for overseeing it and following up on it. And I don't know that we have the capacity, to take that on. Unless they want to give us another person to do that.
So
Can I add something there?
Yeah, please, Paul, go ahead.
Well, I mean, it has not been my understanding that that language meant that the commission was going to be the ongoing staff. That, the Tribal State Commission was not intended to be the ongoing staff to the Wabanaki Studies Commission, but to play a facilitating startup role. And, so I mean, that remains to be decided how the ongoing staffing, at least that's my understanding, is that issue has not been resolved. But I think there's considerable sentiment that be a position within the Department of Education.
Maybe just some clarification, because
So with that being said, so is 1642, 41? 42, sorry. Is that a continuation of 290 LD 291 from 2001?
Well, yeah, well, it's a
transition to a new bill?
I think it's an amendment of the existing bill, actually, the existing statute, I believe, but.
And so, I guess my question is, so there is many efforts already out there with, in terms of education for Wabanaki. Portland School District has developed some curriculum that is now completed and I think is being implemented. I know in the Portland area for sure. And then there is also another effort at the Maine Department of Education. So what they're calling Moose modules. That is being guided, I guess is a better word, for by Brianne Lola. Are those part of the Education Committee's considerations as well?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, yes. And that they're part of those have all been brought into the conversations of the group that's been meeting concerning promoting the adoption of this bill. All those things have been included in those, and there are people involved in those efforts who are involved in this working group.
I think part of the problem is, it's entirely within the hands of the Department of Education to continue that program. And it's entirely voluntary for any teacher to participate as well, to use those modules, which is contrary to the original intention of the bill in 2001, which was a mandate.
Right.
Yeah. So.
I did ask Bree what her funding was. She said it was pandemic money, so it was limited. It's not continuing funding, so that was concerning.
The bill does say, MITSC shall provide staffing assistance to the commission. So.
And you're quoting from 1642?
Yeah, it's in the bid, it's, MITSC shall provide staffing assistance to the commission. Each entity appointing member to the commission shall assist in identifying and securing resources to enhance the work of the commission. So it's assigning staffing to MITSC, and then it's this sort of fuzzy wording about people are gonna go come up with some resources.
Right.
So you want to have the education committee address that.
Mhm.
And when they work the bill.
So that is my concern. So back to you, if that language isn't changed in some way. I mean, you could go one of two ways. You could say, okay, MITSC could take that on, but we would need another person to pretty much, be devoted to that, because that's a statewide initiative.
Hmm.
Or it should be in the Department of Education and be funded as a mandate should be funded.
Although it wasn't.
Right.
In 2001. It was not funded mandate. January 9th.
Yeah. What do you think? Do you want MITSC to take that on, or are we the right home for that?
It was specifically mentioned that we should be included in some way.
Well, as it's drafted, the MITSC would be one of the members of the newly reconstituted Wabanaki Studies Commission. Again, my understanding at the time was that the reference to MITSC staffing was a facilitation startup role, not an ongoing role. And
Will need to be tweaked
Yeah.
or funded.
Robert,
So the way I'm understanding it, this is a bill that's already passed, right, and in place.
no,
no,
there's a hearing on January 9th, that's right.
Okay, so the thing is if something like that gets passed, I mean, and we are required to provide that staffing. Of course, and here we go with funding, because I mean, we just finally got funding approved, and in place that actually helps us out to do the job that we're supposed to do now. But if that passes with that wording, and the way I'm understanding it is that now we are going to have to seek additional funding from the state to be able to provide that staffing, however that staffing is going to be, and I agree, Paul, mentioned, I think, was it Paul? I can't remember. Anyway, whoever, mentioned, actually sending someone sitting, education, which I think is where it belongs. But, even then, providing a staff member to be able to sit in there, we would still have to increase what we bring in order to afford paying that staff member. There would seem to be like a permanent position, right?
Are you on that committee?
No.
No. You're just aware of what's.
Yeah, and I've been helping with the group that we got together to work on it. But that's as much as I've participated.
And is it the understanding that MITSC is going to be providing support, or?
I wasn't aware that clause was in there. And I wonder why it's in there. And when it ended, because I'm looking at it and there it is. So
can I comment further on this? It is not our understanding that language is intended to make MITSC the ongoing staff for the Wabanaki Studies Commission. And I don't believe there is even much sentiment for MITSC playing that role. So the group that drafted this language hasn't met since the legislature adjourned. If it had, we would have addressed this issue. And we intend to address the issue because Jill has flagged it as well. And, and I would also point out that it's my understanding that there was no funding provided in connection with this bill as it stands. As it stands, there's no fiscal note with the bill. And the bill would have the same weakness that the prior bill had if that does not change. So this bill, if it's going to be successful, this effort has to have funding attached to it. And I assume that that conversation is going to happen when this group reconvenes.
So this Wabanaki Studies Commission, they don't even have their own budget.
My understanding is there's no money attached to this bill at this point.
So is that something we can look to address in January
I,
at the hearing?
I assume that everyone involved in the group is going to want to address it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is it-
So when we first took a look at this, and I brought it to my leadership and said, hey, what do you think about this? It basically boiled down to the recreation of the Wabanaki Studies Commission, and not much else. And we weren't on board with that. So if that's all it is, then we're probably still, if that's all it is, it doesn't solve the problem that we've had for so long now.
Right. Great job.
I was just gonna say that, yeah, I think there will be a meeting very soon. We're trying to schedule it even next week. And hopefully you can be part of that, Jill, and we can bring up this issue.
Who are we having?
It's like,
Authors of the.
yeah, the authors of the report. I don't wanna miss someone by trying to list them up. Everyone
okay.
who's involved in that group, but
Yeah, basically.
ACLU is one of them, Abbey Museum, John Grant Mitchell.
Portland School District?
I don't think
Are
there's
they
anyone from Portland
Okay.
School District.
No, Lori Osher.
Lori Osher is, yeah,
Maine Department of Education?
well, we have meetings with them, so they're not part of the group that co-authored the report, but we've been in a lot of discussion with them because we'd like their support in a public hearing. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to still be hashed out. And we can make sure the MITSC staffing is one piece of that.
Although, is it the sense of the commission that there should be funded staffing assistance and support? In order to make it a successful effort?
Yeah, I mean, should that funding come from MITSC?
No, no, no. We
No,
shouldn't have to, like,
no.
Oh, state funding,
hat in hand. It should be state funding,
state funding, yeah.
and maybe it should be under either the studies commission itself. If that's a permanent body, I don't know what it is. Is it just like a blue ribbon commission that comes and goes?
From my understanding, the first time this commission was created, well, it doesn't exist today, so it was a limited time period. I'm not sure how long it ran for. That was before my time.
And MITSC was very involved in that, I think, originally. So I've looked through a lot of the old files of that. I mean, Paul knows more about it than I do.
Maybe they just looked to MITSC because it's a stable entity that's been operating for 43 years. Already has
But I think if we
staff
do
and
have
budgets.
a designated staff, it would have to come from state funding in terms of, the bill would have to carry that fiscal number.
Yeah, and if I could just comment, when LD 291 was passed back in 2001, I think it was,
Yep.
and MITSC was very involved, and MITSC at that time provided assistance in terms of facilitating the original meetings of the commission. That was the role that MITSC played. MITSC wasn't doing curriculum development or overseeing that or anything of that nature, sort of the ongoing work. That wasn't MITSC's role. MITSC's role was to facilitate the meetings of the commission and to help draft the report. And I think there were 2 reports that came out of that commission. But as far as the ongoing work of actually dealing with curriculum, that was never the role of MITSC, and I don't contemplate that it would be now. And unless a decision is made to place that with MITSC and provide the staff and money to do it.
Does this bill contemplate ratification by the tribes? Because if not, where does the state get off directing MITSC to do anything? Constitutional problem, I guess.
MITSC has been asked to do various things over the years that I mean, this would not be the first time, but the prior Wabanaki Studies Bill being a good example of that, where it was written into it that MITSC would provide that facilitation for the Wabanaki Studies Commission, but it was again, I think, as Rachel said, a lot of this is still to be hashed out. I'm surprised to hear they've scheduled it for a meeting on January 9th. That's news to me. And the group that's been working to pass the bill hasn't met and needs to meet. So,
I would think,
I'm sorry, I just want to add, it might be helpful information that this is obviously this is the short session. And so I think right now leadership has, or the executive council has directed all of the committees to finish all of their work by the end of January. That's obviously not going to happen, but that's probably why these are being scheduled so early, so that it can be a public hearing, because there hasn't been a public hearing on this bill yet. So there needs to be one, so then they can continue on with the work session and continue the bill forward. But the public hearing is the first step. So, you know, I don't necessarily agree that having the public hearing so early is a bad idea, because it has to happen in order for the bill to be able to move forward.
well, no, thanks. I appreciate that clarification.
I think we have a little bit
Can I
of direction.
just also add that whenever it's appropriate.
Yeah, like
food
that.
is here if you wanted to call a short break. At your convenience.
Yeah, we'll finish up number 7 here.
Yeah, I think when it comes to this bill, we brought up some very valid problems that we see with it already. And it's probably worth sharing that in the public hearing,
So
if we're all on board.
is it fair to say the sentiment is that you want a real substantive, the outcome desired is a real substantive effort that will carry forward the mission? And if it requires staffing or funding, wherever it is, DOE, MITSC, whatever, is funded. What you don't want, what I'm hearing people say, what you don't want is a weak, watered down, toothless piece of legislation that doesn't have the resources. So you want, I mean, that's the gist of what I'm getting out of the conversation, regardless of kind of the assigned staffing task. It's got to be real. It has to have a resource, and it has to be able to deliver.
Yes, yeah, I mean, because like in 2001, that unfunded mandate was basically dormant for 20 years.
I would say that to be accurate from my conversations I've had with my leadership is that, you know, if we're gonna address this issue, we need to address the problems that weren't addressed back with this unfunded mandate, and the biggest issue was funding.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. So I think that gives you some response to your, Jill, to your question.
All right, was there any other
so let's be
Um,
honest.
MITSC work plan and staff reports, activities?
Well, do you want to continue to go through them or just to kind of touch on them? Because the next one is that we would help educate and implement the new Maine Indian Child Welfare Act. Unfortunately, that was not certified, so it's not effective yet because that has to somehow get fixed. And I do hope that there's going to be some training on it, because I looked at it and I looked at the state statute and I thought there's some differences here, that there's going to need to be some education, like placement preferences are different under existing state law than they would be under it.
Mr. Chairman, will you recognize the representative from the AG's office?
Yes, so the certifications that were in the state Indian Child Welfare Act were only for the amendments to the main implementing act. And that was just to say that the tribal courts would have exclusive jurisdiction over any proceedings under the state Child Welfare Act in addition to the federal Child Welfare Act. It's true that those certifications didn't come in. But it was only as to those pieces that amended the implementing act. The rest of the bill is in effect. And, you know, the primary focus of that state act is to affect what is happening in state courts. It doesn't affect what happens in tribal courts. And then I will also point out that those same amendments that were in the State Child Welfare Act were also in the Mi'kmaq Nation Restoration Act, to amend those portions of the implementing act that were amending the exclusive tribal court jurisdiction to add that word state and federal child welfare proceedings into the exclusive jurisdiction of the tribal courts. And there have been certifications received from the Passamaquoddy tribe, the Holton Band of Maliseets, and and for the Mi'kmaq Nation. So those three pieces have been, you know, quote unquote, certified to have those amendments take place through the implementing act. Although to be fair, like it was an amendment to the implementing act for the Mi'kmaq Nation. It was, you know, through the Mi'kmaq Nation Restoration Act itself.
So thank you.
So in short, the state doesn't need certifications for it from us. Sure. Speaking of certifications though, there was a bill, and we talked about it, months ago, but, the one that was drafted by Brian Collar to, require the state to notify the nations when, there is certifications necessary, which, is surprising that it's not required. But when you mentioned that we could do something to improve that process, yeah, we could work with that bill.
Right. So, yeah, that's in 1835. I haven't worked my way all the way through it. I think maybe, Checkaway, did you read through this? And it's broader than right now. Certifications are usually only required for amendments to the implementing act. This would apparently be broader. That legislation that expressly identifies or applies to a federally recognized Indian tribe or tribes in the state or members of the tribe requires the tribal government to certify that they agree with the law. So I do think that the process could be improved, and that was something that came up during the Judiciary Committee hearing. Was, you know, there was no follow-up, but there's also they were contemplating a process by which the Secretary of State would send notice to the tribes, to the designated official. And I guess I wanted to ask was, couldn't that just be the tribal clerk? Instead of this big open question, who's the designated official? Couldn't it just be in the law that it's the tribal clerk? Does every tribe have one? That kind of thing. And then the time frame was really short. It was like the Secretary of State had 45 days to provide this notice, but the law said you had to respond within 90 days. And if like Penobscot, we have to call a general meeting, so the whole membership has to come together. And for them to try to comply with that is really pretty unrealistic. So I would like to, you know, maybe work with the commission to kind of work out what should that look like that works for, you know, each tribe given their process. This bill, way to do it. I also have to go back and fix some things because there were no, so like Penobscot, we didn't have our certifications. Speak for Penobscot. Sorry, I'm sorry. I thought the chief said that in the hearing, so.
I can't share that, HBMI, we have a tribal clerk.
Okay, yeah.
You have a,
We do have a tribal.
yeah, yeah, that's what I-
You have one or two.
two.
So maybe that would make sense. That way there's not a big question. Who do we send this to? And then, you know, basically continuing to enhance our function as a research and an education entity. We kind of talked about C-Run, but the library is pretty extensive now. I think there's quite a bit on there. It was one of the few places I could actually find Settlement Act, because I think they stopped printing them. Federal Reporter of Federal Statutes. So that's where I found it, but, Paul will be working on that and then there'll be ongoing effort. And then for under natural resources protection, this is also under the first mandatory statutory requirement, updating the MITSC fishing rules. So Bob's been really involved with that. Bob, do you want to speak to that? Or-
Sure. Well, I don't know where to start with this. You know, we have the exclusive jurisdiction to regulate fishing in certain, what I'm calling boundary waters, although that's not a term in the statute. It's the ones that Zeke had read off, any water where it's within tribal Indian territory for half a mile or more, or one side is within Indian territory for a mile or more, or ponds over 10 acres in size, 50% of or more of the shoreline of which is tribal. We have not updated those rules since at least 2002. And after I got into scratching the surface of this, I found out that we never effected the 2002 rules because that would have required complying with the Maine Administrative Procedure Act, which basically means publishing notice in the newspaper and notifying the Secretary of State that we've done it. We never did that. So as far as the Secretary of State of Maine is concerned, the last regulations MITSC has promulgated for boundary waters were those of 1998. So we're coming up on 25 years since we last regulated boundary waters. And since then, the climate has changed, the world has changed, dams have been removed, invasive species have been introduced either naturally or deliberately, and both the state and the tribes are trying to restore other species. So there's a lot going on in the water, and I thought it would really be a good idea for us to update those things. The problem is that the statute gives us the authority and the jurisdiction to do that, but neither it nor our bylaws spells out much of a procedure by which we might promulgate regulations. And from the time I've been with the commission, it has been sort of the general institutional understanding that we don't have the resources to update those boundary waters regulations because that takes scientific talent, which I don't think any of us possess in sufficient degree anyway. And if you don't have the scientific talent, you need at least money to hire people to do it. And we don't have enough money to do what we're already doing. So it occurred to me that instead of hiring our own independent set of biologists, that we could turn to the tribal resource managers who regulate one side of the stream, so to speak, and the state IF&W people who regulate the other side of the stream, and get them to agree between themselves on what regulations might be required for boundary waters. I thought that was a great invention until I realized that that was exactly the way that MITSC had tried to do it in 2002 and actually did it in 1998. Went back through the memory of John Banks, now retired from the commission, but with the Penobscot resource people for his whole career. And he explained that, yeah, that's pretty much how they did it, that he and I think Paul Jakes, then IF&W, were both commissioners at the time, and they sat down and basically worked a lot of it out between themselves. Although they did hold some public meetings, they had to hire some survey assistants, particularly with Grand Lake Matagammon, to figure out whether that met the 50% linear threshold or not. And I moved that around through the commission, and gradually all the native representatives and tribes seemed to think that was a good idea, something worth doing, and that they would be willing to cooperate with state resource managers in the effort. And I approached Jerry Reed in the governor's office because I didn't want to try to do something that the state was going to resist. He said, it's a great idea. Contact Judy Camuso. Let me know if you need any help. Don't bother me, basically. Judy Camuso quickly passed it down to her career staff. And in my mind, part of the whole effort here involved getting down below the elected and appointed levels of the government and into the career biologist. I thought that would avoid all the overlay that comes with politics. Paul and I met with Francis Brodigam and Joe Overstreet, whose positions with the IF&W I can't recall, but they're sort of the top of the food chain, so to speak, in fisheries regulations. They were delighted, maybe too strong a word, but they were very glad to hear from us because they like fishing rules to work right, just like I do. And they realized that we hadn't updated the rules since at least 2002, 1998 to them. In fact, I sort of stumbled on the problem when I thought last summer or the summer before, you remember now, gee, I'd like to go fishing in some of these MITSC regulated waters. And I went on to the state's website where it's a very nice interactive thing. You can click on a water and find out what the rules are. Came to find out that the state seems to have a different impression of what the rules are in various places from what our 2002 brochure said. Well, the short answer to that is our 2002 brochure was never effective, but it's also in conflict with our 1998 rules. Because nobody from the tribes has been in contact with anybody from IF&W in 17 to 25 years, depending upon how you count it. So as I say, the people at IF&W were delighted to hear from us because it had occurred to them that there were these conflicts developing in the fishing regulations. They didn't know how to solve it any more than I did. But as a result of our meeting last June, we agreed informally that the IF&W people would go back within their agency, try to figure out how they wanted to approach this, and they would prepare a summary of our June meeting, and we would go from there. Not to run too far afield, I haven't already, but we're all going to have to think about, okay, how are we going to do this? We're going to do it as a committee of the whole with all the tribes for all the watersheds with the state people, or we're going to break the different watersheds out or break the tribes out or whatever. Nobody's really gotten that far. But the state, Brodigam and Overstreet, have expressed a robust willingness to cooperate with tribal biologists on just getting the rules straight. And it's been left. I last contacted them shortly before the Tribal Fisheries Summit that was snowed out earlier in December. And they responded that they had been fully committed, pulled in several different directions, I think was the way they put it, but that they would very much like to get back to the project. I reminded them that I'm out January and February. They said, well, let's get back to it when you get back in March. Part of my promise to all of the Native people, and I made it to the state people too, is I won't be involved in this. I just want to introduce everybody. You do the work, you do the science, you tell us, and we'll just approve everything. But for some reason, they still wanted us in that loop. And although I didn't come prepared with a copy of the state rule book, their written response to me most recently was, while we're waiting for that, perhaps everybody can take a look at the page in the state fishing rule book where they mention tribal waters. I don't know if you're familiar with this, no, but there's a page, I think it's page 17 in their rule book, that says for information about fishing in tribal waters, contact, and there's an address with each, well, Penobscot and Passamaquoddy offices. I guess we now have to put, who's in charge? Is that Sam for you people, or should we send it to somebody? We're gonna have to update that, and I'll send you all an email to explain.
So we'll get back to this in March, is that?
We'll get back to this in
will come
March,
back
and what-
into the mix.
And what we can do between now and then, and I'll follow through on this, is send the page in the rule book that the state people were asking if we can cooperate in the update. I'll send it around to everybody. It's basically just contact people in the tribal offices, and phone numbers and so on, but that would be a start.
Right, I would send the whole book and just mention the page.
Yes.
Or is it actual? How big is it?
It's the little regulations booklet like
Oh,
that, and then it's online.
Right, that's what I'm saying. I don't want the physical book, just the
I'll
link to the.
I'll get you the right link.
Yeah.
And the point of this whole effort, I've become invested in this. The idea is not just to update the regulations, which we're supposed to do, but everything that implies, like caring for the resource. And because of the peculiar fact that we don't have the means to do it ourselves as a commission, but we have to rely on state and tribal officials, to my mind, is a great opportunity to get not just government to government relationships, but biologist to biologist relationships. Because I think that's where a lot of the strength of the people in this state lies, is with the people who actually do the work, not the regulators and legislators and so on. And I think that could be a model for the future in whatever the reform package brings. If it's something closer to a federal model, which is government to government, sovereign to sovereign, there's no agency or office that you can go through and litigate these issues. The two governments have to figure it out between themselves. And I expect it. I expect there to be all kinds of disagreements. I still expect there to be progress on overall agreements. And I would like to think that can be a model for everyone else when they say, well, how is this going to work? I only wish that we've been able to push a little farther so that we might be in the program now while the legislature is contemplating the next reform. But at best, we'll have to take it up during spring and summer with a hope that we might be able to get the results into the state's next rule book and their interactive map on the internet.
Right,
Enough
Yeah.
for now.
so keep us updated.
I will go back to, I think everybody, Sandy, if you're still there, I think all of the tribes have designated a volunteer for the project, although I can't remember who everybody is. I think it's Joe Sewell.
John,
In any event, we still need a representative from Zabayag. But we've got until March to firm that up. And I will keep you all posted as appropriate.
thank you. So we'll break for lunch, but if we have other items that are for number 7,
Got a few.
Okay, all right, so let's take a
Might be good to take.
quick break for lunch and then we'll come back in what? 15? And 15 minutes?
Good report. Oh, I'm sorry. No, that was great. Thank you. I really do need it as a proof of concept. Look, you can do this. Yeah, you don't need a bureaucracy. We should know those words anyway.
Set these out. There's like. There's like.
I still do it.
decided to hire that without necessarily having to get the building. And that's announcing that, a couple of possibilities have presented themselves. So the question of whether they really realize if I'm really young family. And all that stuff. So hopefully in the next 2 or 3 weeks. So 10 o'clock is the hearing today.
Good one, right?
Some appeal.
Well, so 10 a.m. this morning, right? And is Jenna's hearing. And then she has to make a determination prior to the 22nd. And then once she makes her determination, see
Following all of those.
where it goes. Yeah, wildness.
It's unprecedented, really. We haven't had an insurrection since 1861.
Oh, Lord. Oh, I love those. You're just trying to interfere with my ability to have a choice. And I'm thinking, I said, to them, it's very clear there are qualifications. You either meet or you don't, period.
You know, you could have elected Arnold Schwarzenegger. if you had the chance, but no.
Oh, yeah.
Well, thank you, Kim. You've been very valuable. That's
To help, I don't mean to overstep.
You haven't yet.
Noted.
Boy, it's hard to keep. I don't know if it's just my advancing age or what, but it seems harder and harder to keep track of all of this. Just the certifications and which parts have been certified. And I wondered if maybe certification had been withheld because everybody figured, oh, it's moot now because they're not going to, the Supreme Court did not gut the federal act.
Not yet. Because they didn't, they didn't address the placement preferences. They said that there was no standing on that issue, so.
It said there, oh, no standing, yes.
Which is correct. Like objectively correct. There wasn't any standing in that case on that issue, but that doesn't mean that there aren't, a number of other cases that are percolating where someone will have standing on that issue. Are we still streaming?
Pardon me?
Are we still streaming?
We may be, this may be a hot mic as far as I know.
Okay.
Yes, I think
Oh,
it's
they always are.
less complicated to just let it continue streaming, so be aware of. what
Less
it's-
complicated is better.
It was quite a project to get that to work. So there's sandwiches over here, there's turkey, roast beef, and I think it's like a mozzarella vegetarian. If anyone wants a sandwich, Kim, you're welcome to have a sandwich too.
Thank you. I have a yogurt situation here.
Okay.
Deciding.
Yeah.
All right.
I feel like I did when I was in high school and college, and I was always showing up unprepared because people would come up with me. I didn't know about that. I read it. Rachel, what are we eating? And you see, your news surprised me the most. I completely missed that.
That change.
Yeah.
Yeah, I did as well. We're so focused on all of the other aspects of 1620 that MITSC inclusion kind of get my notice too.
I don't know if we've all heard of the designation that Madonna Sakoma gave MITSC early in its tenure. But as she explains it, when the legislature was in the tribes were first considering the 1980 statutes, they created a big trash can. They put everything that didn't fit anywhere else in the trash can.
It's,
Trash can.
Yeah, yeah.
Wait a minute, okay. Regulating the.
And the live stream is
I
still
got
going.
that. Reservation. That's
And my
not really the same thing. Reporting for the signature. It's just like, okay. Other duties as assigned.
But yeah.
Hodgepodge.
Well, I agree with Noel.
This is a turkey.
Still there, it says the purpose of the MITSC in the act was to improve relations between the state and tribes.
I think.
Although that's not exactly what it said,
Roger Tracy was so that
but it's a good guiding
all
principle.
the codes will be.
Don't do anything.
Let's see. We kept trying to improve.
You have a sick granddaughter following me on Facebook, somebody in your family. Erica, does Erica have a daughter? Erica? Don't you have a granddaughter, Erica?
No.
Okay, never mind.
Emily?
She's in the Southwest, isn't she?
Oh, Emily is Southwest.
Somebody they connected to your family, sick baby.
My daughter,
Your daughter,
yeah,
whose name is
Emily.
the one from the Southwest.
No, she's North,
Okay,
another one.
and how is the baby?
Well, she's, they're trying to determine what there's some sort of infection,
With that RSV?
might be RSV now.
Hey, Bob.
No.
Bob.
Yes.
Robert. Hey, so I was just wondering, have you been talking to? I'm assuming you have entities of the Passamaquoddies, as Penobscots and Maliseets in regard to finding a way to develop those regulations, or make changes to those regulations.
Well, the data reps here have designated somebody in their tribe, except we're still waiting for a seat from Zavai. Unfortunately, I can't bring the names, but well, it's Sam St. John and three others, I think, have volunteered from the Holton band. We do have a name, I think it's Sewell in the township, and then I can't remember who of the Passamaquoddies of the Penobscots. But yes, the idea is we will line up resource managers, IF&W in each of the tribes and put them in a room. Oh, and Mark Shepherd was also on the list, although he's never actually signed up for it.
Yeah.
We're at Common Ground. Did you eat all that good food?
I did, and it was good food.
Sorry, I didn't run.
No worries, I was, thanks. I was just wondering, Jill, you mentioned that, MITSC legislative proposal response process in a separate handout.
Excuse me.
Okay, you can wait.
We need one. You know, to do the front.
I'm gonna do it. Or I can share the screen up there.
You found your code.
I actually never got it. My computer had to do this whole update and then it started working again.
Oh,
So I was able to just log on through my computer, which solved the whole problem. But yeah, we need to figure out the code thing for the future because I don't know, Robbie tried to change everything. Those come to me, but it still wasn't coming to me.
You know, gradual learning, that there's all these little systems that are going to fall. Changing.
I don't know. Section?
I wouldn't know the difference.
The scientific instruments of Wisconsin. Oh, it is a section. I'm guessing he probably did. Darren had the lead.
It's funny, they get it, they get involved in things. Something like that, they have, don't they, boy.
Does anyone want more coffee? Can I make it their pot coffee?
I mean, not for me,
Okay.
so rough. We just wanted a party. How it's different. And very quick, I don't. The reactions. You. In terms of their openness to be so influenced by certain types of propaganda. I think it shows not a great foundation.
Broadreach went around.
Knowledge base.
Well,
There's not actually a
Take off.
deadline. We're trying to.
try to spend.
Do we want to renew it?
Well, we already did, and so I think the thought is that we would go elsewhere. Try to go elsewhere to the next
Harvard
grants and then maybe return to them.
approved.
So, an application.
What's your name?
Mhm.
Pens.
Oh, yeah, today's the
Written
day.
down on a rail. Yeah.
Yeah,
Andrew would be open to
Think there
extending
should
it.
be better answers.
well,
Oh my God.
they haven't told us that we have to spend it by a certain date. We're trying to impose that on ourselves.
No, I mean another.
Oh,
Yeah, clearly.
I'm sure they would be able to do that. I think we were just thinking of,
So.
yeah,
And
giving,
this is the-
like, they've already
like the
given us
best you
2
can
grants,
do.
so maybe going elsewhere. I don't.
But I do think there's.
Very loose process.
The figure. Misplaced
Yes, it is.
word.
And I think she would.
Prior to this whole
Going
conflict.
underground as well. I think she's keenly interested.
Within academia. and
Okay, good to know.
cancel culture. So whatever it is. End up. Willing to speak with some clarity and. SAT.
College board first period. You line down.
Yes, I can do that.
Instead of turning to the old boy network up. Now they're just so much these dirty Jews who spend
That chart is huge.
learning somehow.
You mean in terms of report?
Response was the move toward hell. I think this is one of the ideas all around the student.
But what we've done in the past, what has been worked on.
I would think that after
Since the
that
last
30.
meeting.
would be a little.
I know we
Well,
should have done a couple of
Sorry, what was
staff
that?
I think that's reason.
like in the past, it's just been what's happened since the last meeting.
Yes,
Disaster.
on legislation.
Not necessarily legislation, because that would be a different agenda.
Right, that's what I was kind of getting for.
Okay.
And so
It's,
detailed design.
All right, well, we better get moving.
Yeah, so hopefully Paul will come back because I'm not this person.
President.
Oh, Tebow.
University of Florida.
When we get to that,
Right at the beginning. It's beautiful. Okay. Clear.
that's after this.
He's one of the few. Yeah.
No, were you asking me something?
No, we're just looking to get started again. You all set?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll continue on. We're still on.
Yes.
Okay.
So kind of going through the work plan with the report update. So we talked about on the natural resources protection is promoting and publicizing the sea run report. We touched on that already. Then the next matter was monitoring the ultra chem site. That's in settlement phase, so just making sure. Settlement. Some discussion about supporting a study of the impact on PFAS on Wabanaki communities and citizens, and Rachel attended a meeting on that.
Yeah, it was an informational session, presented in the, Environment and Natural Resources Committee, and it was very informative. It was a lot of information. It's basically an extremely complex problem. But I was happy that there was acknowledgement, of this being, having a unique impact on tribal communities and citizens, especially subsistence fishing, the impact on fish. So anyway, yeah, there was no conclusions. It was more like updating people on the latest
Right, good.
science.
Yeah, I mean, all citizens should be aware.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a really big issue.
Big issue.
Mhm. Yeah, and just, I guess the biggest takeaway for me was to hear just the history of how these chemicals have been, there's like a huge list of chemicals that were allowed to be put into products and put out in the world without any testing at all.
Mhm.
And now we're having to like people are having to prove that these are dangerous and causing harm. But they're already out there and a lot of damage is already done.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So we weren't suggesting that we would do this study, but if there is a study, we would
There is a
support it.
study.
Keep track of it.
Yes.
For another entity. And then we've been monitoring Wolfman and other mining projects. I did attend the public hearing on October 23rd, and the room was full. And there were 50 people who spoke in opposition, some really compelling, powerful people. Even the youth were especially affecting because they talked about climate change, what happens with rising water levels and such. So mostly the complaints were about the perceived environmental risks to this very pristine area, lack of confidence in Wolfton to actually carry this out and to be around to, there has to be any kind of remediation. Then what was really heartening was to hear all the concerns about the negative impact on Wabanaki sustenance practices, as well as use of sacred lands. And so that came up numerous times. So there was 50 people opposed and about 6 people spoke in support of it. And a couple of those people were miners themselves, were speaking on behalf of support. Then this past week, we attended the deliberation by the Land Use Planning Commission. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah, that was an interesting process that I've never witnessed before, but their staff had drawn up a whole chart of the various issues to be weighed related to whether or not they want to rezone this land. And there was a huge turnout of people present listening who I think are in opposition to this idea.
I'm sorry, so, and was that the place in Pembroke or is that different?
No, this is Pickett.
Pickett
Yeah.
Mountain?
Mhm. Yeah. So we met at a facility in Brewer for this meeting and there was a large group of people, listening into this meeting. And the commissioners were.
I think the staff presented, they said, here are all the factors, this is the criteria you have to consider. Here are the factors in favor of it, where the petitioner, the applicant has satisfied it versus what are the negatives to it. And I think they kind of gave a really balanced view of it, the staff did, which was kind of surprising. And then the reaction of the commissioners was different.
Yeah, it seemed like they had a lot of concerns. And there's gonna be a final, I guess the staff, my understanding of the process is they take into account all the concerns of the commissioners and then there's gonna be a final decision in February, yeah.
It's interesting to see what happens.
What does that decision look like? Who votes on that? Is that a vote from the commission?
Yeah. Decide whether to approve the rezoning application when it comes down to.
And then it still has to go through the DEP, right? But
I don't know if it goes to the DEP, they don't get the rezoning.
oh, yeah, if they don't get it,
Right,
but if
yeah.
they did, then there's more hoops to jump through, but,
I don't think it looks good.
yeah.
Another issue we're looking at is remediation of the structural and environmental harms to waterways, including dams and things like dioxin, impact on the fisheries. So Rachel's been attending these living tide meetings.
Yeah, and sadly, we postponed that river trip, so I don't actually have a lot to report right now, but just that there is major progress happening on the Scudic River, also known as the Scudic.
Under this category of sustaining cultures, there's the bill about including a tribal member on the Baxter State Park Board, I guess. And I'm not sure where that's at.
Yeah, does anyone have an update on that? Because I'm curious as well.
I thought you might have an update.
No, I don't know. I mean, last we heard it was opposed. And the family got involved in opposition. And there was a compromise that was offered. And that's all I heard. The compromise was instead of putting them on the board, but to put a tribal person on a different commission. I forget what that one was called, but that was the compromise that was offered, and that's last I heard.
Who's working this out? I mean, the compromise among the legislature now, or?
That's a good question. I wish I was more informed on this. I'm not sure.
trust, the family trust
Is
involved.
I think so. In order to get a person on the board, it needed to go to the family, and
They
they opposed
opposed,
it.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so. And I think they were the ones who offered it, just different solution.
This, yeah, it was LD 294, act to include a tribal member of Baxter State Park Authority. It was carried over. Turning to the Committee on Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. Another role MITSC plays is to be available to support repatriation efforts when that's needed. I think in that way, there's the area of culturally unaffiliated remains and was not a clear tribal association. And that might be something Commission would get involved in. And this time one was more of a, was a request by basket makers. They were talking about that back in the 60s, the paper companies had agreed that basket makers could come onto the land and basically cut ash trees, take ash trees. And so there was this agreement, but then the difference was that the paper companies were like locally owned versus then they were bought out by these multinational corporations. So soon those corporations were not honoring this because of liability concerns. And she said 7 Islands apparently was still honoring it to a point, but that's kind of gone by the wayside. So that was something to just look at, could we, do something around that? As well as sweetgrass, getting access to sweetgrass.
Mhm.
And so we don't have a firm plan to do something about this right now, but it's just something to keep. an
Yeah,
eye open
definitely
to.
bring that back to the table.
So I did actually talk to someone who does pick sweetgrass, and she has a written letter from the landowner that gives her permission to go on there. And then she can bring 1 or 2 people with her, so she can teach them. So maybe that's what it's gonna be, is some kind of a sample letter of permission or something. And then also to support tribal language preservation efforts. I was thinking about the signs at Acadia were supposed to be translated into the Wabanaki languages, kind of like they are here on the campus. But it
And then
hasn't,
humane and Chias as
right,
well.
it hasn't happened, so it's something to follow up on.
The federal government that controls the signage in Acadia.
I believe so, but there was a group, and actually it was, I think, Billy Thompson, who's the vice chief at Penobscot, was working on that. Fortunately, he passed away, and so it seems like that lost some steam.
Yeah, so NPS would take care of that.
Yeah. They actually have a project there where they're doing something around sweetgrass, where they're, that's sort of a scientific study that University of Maine, I think, is doing. Trying to see whether, is there a difference if you pick the sweetgrass versus cutting it? And so they're in cooperation with the Park Service. So maybe looks like there's some space to work out something collaboratively. And then this long commission name, the Permanent Commission on Racial and Indigenous Tribal Populations, okay. They have a Place Justice Project, which is basically addressing racist and problematic names in the state of Maine. They were supposed to have a meeting last night.
Oh, that's right, you
Yeah.
sent that out. Did
Yeah.
they have it?
No, it was a very strange thing. They didn't send a notice, but when I went to log into the Zoom, they said it had been postponed until January 4th. So. Following up on
Sure,
that.
why.
Have that pen?
Oh, I handed it with the card. I'm sorry.
I've got a pen that you can use.
Oh. So January 4th?
Is that the one?
Yes.
That was my pen. I don't want to lose it.
Oh, I don't have the card, but I do have. Oh, yeah, well, that's a very nice picture.
And then the economic and revenue development is another basket, looking at the monitoring and assessing the implementation of the tribal online sports betting. Keeping an eye on that.
Just generally, when does that start?
It did already happen.
Started.
And is it
First month, the blockbuster numbers.
Yeah, millions of dollars.
Wow.
OneDrive's doing really well because they went with Game Kings,
DraftKings.
DraftKings, and I've seen their ads everywhere.
Yeah.
And they,
Yeah, that's the Passamaquoddy. It was, we were all, yeah, we kind of just split.
Right.
What's the other one? Caesar?
Caesars,
Caesar Sportsbook,
yeah,
yeah.
it didn't do as well.
not as well, it's about like 80% DraftKings, 20% Caesars.
Yeah.
But I mean, so from the Holton band, we're, and then Caesars, we're, yeah, it's just going well, yeah.
If you wanna drop a C note, just.
I noticed a picture of Chief Nicholas wearing a DraftKings shirt.
Oh, really?
You're the, governor's meeting.
Yeah. Do we know how much that is likely to generate for the tribes, or is it too small?
No, it's, yeah,
Really.
yeah, plus it has only a percentage of whatever you take in, and the state gets a cut. But also, I was shocked that the gaming license is $100,000 per tribe. So it's gonna take a
Big
while to
answer.
recoup that.
Mhm.
Interesting to see how it all works out. And this is another issue was, that Bob brought this to me about, facilitating tribal access to federal block grant funding. And there's pass-through funding that comes to the state. And then tribes can also, in some certain instances, apply directly. I do know that the state has gotten block grants in the past, but because the tribal population is so small, that piece has been very small. And I found out about it and I said, well, are you getting this juvenile justice money? And I'm like, oh yeah, well, it's only like, $714 and to do juvenile prevention work. And I was like, we could use $714. So then the state started working with us on doing that. And I actually think they kicked in an extra money. But I don't know the whole scope of what's available for block grants. Seems like there's many federal agencies that are responsible for distributing that. And the process is not great on the reporting. So I think we can look at Maine and see if they have reports on what has gone passed through to the tribes, and then maybe keep our eyes open for chances for them to apply directly, not go through the state.
What is a block grant? I had the impression that
In the old days, you had community development block grants, right?
geographic.
Or infrastructure categories, or, I mean, even a lot of this COVID money, in some ways, I think you could describe it as block grants, because, and they will identify, tribal community, I mean, it's, there'll be essentially, it's whatever the congressional initiative is, where they want to send out a big fat chunk of money to the state to then spend and distribute for a particular purpose. And most of them pre-COVID that I'm aware of have been mostly infrastructure, sewer treatment facilities, that public infrastructure. But the COVID the main job recovery, I mean, that was $1 billion that came in through the MJRP. And that was mostly workforce, targeted to the impact categories of employment that were most negatively impacted by COVID layoffs. So they were putting out funds, workforce training, education, that type of thing. So they're different. There are all kinds of them. HHS has block grant,
TANF goes under that, used to go under that. TANF used to go under block grants. And then, I'm not sure, was it, Paul, was it you or Bob who was in touch with Jerry Reed about that?
It was all signed the letter. I talked to Reed, I think you've seen Paul's letter.
So you would get the right people working on this and pull something together as soon as.
Yeah, it's just, so you'll know what we're talking about. I think it was Chief Rena Newell, about a year ago, when we had our listening tour visit there. In addition to inspiring the whole idea of co-management, asked sort of off the top of her head, can we find out how the state has handled money that it administers for the tribes? And I only mentioned that to Jerry Reed like a couple of months ago. He said, yeah, we could probably do that. Probably be a good idea to find out. I don't know where it stands. I haven't pushed him on that since. Wanted to make the appointments first. But that is the kind of thing that I think would be good for MITSC to do, is shed more light on the economic relationship between the state and the tribes.
Agree.
There's two questions there. How much money has come to the tribes and then how much money should have come to the tribes?
I think that's really what it came down to, is that there is missing money there.
Is it, what was that? That's what it came down to.
Is that we didn't get the full amounts that we were expecting to get.
Funds are missing.
Find out what's happening there.
Tell me a little bit more about that. I mean, I understand that.
I wish I could explain more. This is something Chief Sabatis talks about quite a bit, but yeah, that was the main problem that this was trying to address, is that there was this federal money that was supposed to be coming in, was getting funneled through the state and go to multiple sources, instead of just coming straight to the federal governments. And I think it's worth MITSC getting involved to find out exactly what's going on there. And yeah, just keep track of that money.
Well, that's the kind of information we can get the hard way or the easy way. And I'm content to let it proceed by the easy way for the time being.
But maybe I can follow up with you and ask Chief Sabatis what particular
Should be a
money
good source.
was it that, you know, he thought was coming and it didn't come. That's gonna be a bigger project, but.
Yeah.
It's a big one.
Keep an eye on it. And then monitor development of LD 2007, Act to Advance Self-Determination for Wabanaki Nations. I think this is the reformulation of the 26, okay, the big bill that the legislature approved and the governor vetoed. There's apparently no text yet, but the mandate to the Judiciary Committee is that they get it done by the end of January. So there was some skepticism by one of the representatives that that was gonna really happen, but they're supposed to be working on it.
I'm sorry, when you say get it done, you can get the bill.
Get the bill.
Wow.
yes, to-
Yeah.
So we definitely keep tabs on that. And then just improving government to government relations. So one of the things that we need to look at is that LD 1679, which was MITSC's staggered terms bill, had to go back to the tribes for ratification. It didn't get sent there, so it's not effective. And there's a few bills that didn't go back, so trying to figure out what would be a fix to fix those certification dates. There's actually an old law that would have included the Aroostook Band of Micmacs in MITSC, and was sitting there and it didn't get ratified. Some question about whether that was intentional or unintentional, but so there's some older bills on there.
Okay. I'm confused.
It didn't get ratified by who?
By the nation, by the Mi'kmaq Nation.
Right.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
But I just want to try to understand, so you talk about this section, this year, a bill enacted, signed into law. And then when you said it didn't get to the tribe, what?
The tribes had to certify it, that they
Right.
had accepted it.
So any changes to the main implement act need to be certified by the tribal governments. And from my understanding, there were three, that might be my own now, but the ones that we were focused on were 1620, that was the Mi'kmaq Restoration Act on the April line, and this one, MITSC. And just to speak from our perspective, this just kind of dropped off our radar, and we brought it up to discuss at our next council meeting to potentially certify it if they agree. But I understand that would be late, so I'm not sure.
It was a set deadline.
Yeah.
So I actually think maybe MITSC could have a role in following up on these things. So when they go through, it's to, pick up the phone and say.
I was just really asking clarity, because you said it sounded as though that term didn't get to the tribe, there was some action that had to happen on the state side to formally transmit to. But I don't think that's what you're saying.
I don't think there is any formal action as in law that requires the state to notify the tribal governments. That was brought up when we were talking about Brian Collins' bill. Yeah, that would have actually created some kind of legal responsibility there,
But the way it works now,
I think it's on
enacted by the
us.
state and then MITSC or some, facilitate, to help to make sure
Yeah.
that,
I mean, as a commissioner on MITSC, I think it was my responsibility to bring it to the tribal government, and I didn't do that.
oh,
So that's on me.
well, I'm not, I just want to make sure there wasn't some technical process that we were getting hooked up on, fetched up with that we could fix something.
Well, the notice from like the Secretary of State that there is something that needs to be certified by the tribes. That's what's going on in the new bill, apparently. It's gonna mandate that process. I think part of the problem might be that, I think only one tribe has a representative to the legislature right now.
Right.
And so it used to, Priscilla Atting used to be really good about, coming back. She would get us to approve the legislation even before it got enacted. And then once it was enacted, she'd bring it back again. And
But
it's
even
certified again.
informally, if these are bills of MITSC tracking, even informally, we could, I mean, from, again, an administrative staff perspective, could make sure there's a notification that goes out.
By the way-
I'll know better next time too.
Okay, thank you.
Right, yeah, we can, and I think maybe we can,
Okay.
not wanting to step on anybody's toes, but, or saying, not questioning whether they'll do it, without us poking.
Almost literally a case of falling between the cracks.
Yeah, okay.
Am I correct in understanding that we could request more time
Oh,
to try
that's-
to get that?
This is what Janet Stucco, legislative analysis from the Office of Policy and Legal Analysis, wrote on her discussion of, how that bill met with the task force recommendations when she was talking about the lack of certification. She said, if the committee wishes, it may pass legislation extending the time for the affected tribes to certify their agreement to these laws. So I don't know what that would look like, but it would be good to reach out to the tribes and say, here's maybe a one catch-all fix for these ones that are
Yeah.
outstanding to get an extension of time.
That would be helpful for HBMI, but I think, we're only one, everyone else would also need to.
Right, but I think maybe hopefully the tribes can, come together and agree on, okay, here's the fix for it. And we're gonna ask for, how much more time do you need?
Yeah.
Like, those who can, the council can decide, and do the certification versus my tribe, which takes a longer process. So, yeah, I'd love to talk to somebody or who know of a legislator helpful in developing that fix, that would be good, or tack it onto this other bill that's going ahead on certifications across the board.
I wonder if it would make sense, Representative Barandina is the one who sponsored the bill. Would that make more sense?
Right, he's on judiciary, so, yeah.
Start there. So, yeah, so we need to bring the 6 staggered bill back to be certified. And then supporting the effective implementation of the tribal state collaboration statute. Jerry Reed did give an update from the state's perspective on what they've done. He says that they did 15 agencies drafted collaboration policies after receiving input from the Holton Band and MITSC. I guess this was sort of like one template agreement. And that Paul said he had received these. Paul, you had a chance to look at these?
Yeah, we were flooded with these last December and January, both the policies that were adopted and the initial biennial reports. I've gone back over them and assembled them in the shared drive there. One thing that came up was I didn't find a policy from Department of Education or a report from them. And I thought I might have missed it, but I checked in with Zeke, who is the liaison on the Maliseet side of this, and I think Zeke, you told me that you also didn't find one. So I have followed up with a contact to Department of Education. Apparently the liaison who was initially named there has retired. So I'm just trying to track down the policy and the initial report by Department of Education, but otherwise they've all been put together in our shared drive, and I'm thinking maybe we put them somewhere that's easy to find on our website as well.
Terry said that their tribal liaisons had received training on how to implement the act to improve communications, and promote government to government dialogue. I was really interested what that training was, so that would be good to find out. It's one-sided, but he did request our assistance in identifying a source to provide cultural competency training. I guess you had some discussion about that in the past. Okay.
Well, he requested that MITSC offer to help with facilitating that training as requested by the tribes, basically. To assist the tribes, to offer to assist the tribes with that, not for MITSC to unilaterally pursue it.
Is it happening now?
No.
We've had a couple of, we've had some discussions at meetings. When it first came up, a suggestion came from the floor that perhaps that should be outsourced to Reach or Wabanaki Public Health. And then there was some dissension to that. I can't even remember who, but some people or one or more people felt that, well, that's not something you want to outsource to Wabanaki Public Health or Wabanaki Reach, that you really want tribal leaders involved in that, not just contract people. And the last I knew, the project seemed to be gaining importance on the native side, and I got the impression that there might be, more people who wanted to be involved in it than could easily fit, but I don't know. We have not followed up on it. For what it's worth, I tell people, in the government relations world, access is considered very valuable. And Maulian and Zeke and the other tribal advocates worked hard to get that bill through, and now you've got a captive audience. You've got the right to talk to any state agency, commissioner, secretary you want to, and tell them anything you want to. Have at it. But we're just not following through.
I think this could be a really big project in terms of the collaboration agreements. Each tribe does things differently. And what might work for one doesn't work with the other, like even the governmental structures are different. And then in terms of cultural competency, I was just writing little things down about, like there might be a prayer before your meeting, so be prepared for that. Elders eat first. These kinds of, these are like small things. And then there's a larger, how the interaction of tribal people with nature and what that relationship is like. So coming up with that kind of training. Could MITSC convene something? I was just wondering, is there a group already working on that?
I think it came to MITSC and then it died. That's what it seems like.
Well, and you saw the last email communications right? Did you get those emails that I forwarded you?
I'm sorry, I didn't choose.
Okay,
Well,
because what I forwarded you is the last email communications about this. That was as far as it got.
where did it leave it?
I mean, I think, I felt like maybe I was waiting for a response and then, I feel like other things took precedence, and I'd have to go back and read the emails that I sent you, but.
So maybe the two of you can follow
Yeah,
up.
yeah, I think so. And maybe,
Mhm.
some kind of convening and having the tribes
Mhm.
recommend people to represent them in this kind of development community.
I think there's a lot, there's a lot of improvement that we can do for that collaboration statute. I mean, it's not really functioning all that effectively right now. It is, it was a nice idea, but just speaking from that tribal side, we get this communication and we disseminate to the different departments, but all of those people that they end up receiving it already have full workloads. You know, and a lot of stuff is just piling on top of people who are already very busy. That's just from our perspective. And it's, and in short, it doesn't get implemented much yet. I'm not sure any examples of this one, but not nearly as much as I would like to see it. That's just the way I see it.
What do we do?
Yeah, how do we improve it? I don't know.
Well, I'll be meeting with Jerry on Monday.
I think a lot of it is adequate consultation, collaboration also means capacity funding. It means people whose their new job is to handle this. We've been getting funding attached to this. There's just new responsibilities tacked on people who are already very busy. So, yeah, that's one problem, big one.
I think it would be interesting too. I know we've talked before about looking at, like, there were state agencies that really put more effort into crafting something of substance, that wasn't just a cookie cutter. So it'd be interesting to look at those responses, as a better example.
That's what I'll be doing this weekend.
Uh-huh.
I know there are some like existing tribal state agreements around the Indian Child Welfare Act. So transfer cases, so there's some long-standing memorandums of agreement, so those have been working. Some things that are working. But I really think the cultural competency training is really important, because they might not even be sensitized to what issues they need to.
Right.
The training on.
Don't know what they don't know.
This was talked about, that was talked about at the governor's meeting with the chiefs. It was,
Could you give us a little update on how that went with the governor?
yeah, okay. MITSC was brought up. So, I mean, I guess it was a meeting between the chiefs and Governor Mills at Blaine House. It was a friendly, kind of cordial thing. It was hosted in a little side room, like a little tea room, I suppose. Fairly small table with the chiefs sitting around the table with Governor Mills. All the chiefs were there, with the exception of Chief Francis. But William Bryant was there. And the start, it was mostly informal, kind of just updates from each one of our different governments on our different economic development projects. Quite a lot of discussion on our different businesses and how things are going. She kept being very curious about how our how the online sports betting is rolling out. It was I guess discussion on offshore wind. She shared that was something that was very passionate for her. And I'm not sure there was any kind of give or take on either side on that discussion. But there's also a short discussion on MITSC, MITSC's role. She said that she thought that she had appointed some competent individuals that all left now. And
All the competent ones have left.
Good.
no, I think she just expressed disappointment that a lot of state commissioners chose not to continue. And assurance that they would fix that. That was Jerry Reed saying that. What else? There was some discussion on the past bills. The bill that she vetoed. I don't think there was any kind of give or take on either side there, but there was some discussion. I think very broadly, that's how that meeting went. It was friendly, but I'm not sure there's any kind of big agreements or decisions that were made there.
Right.
I think it's worth pointing out that was a required like tribal state summit from 585. And I think that was kind of misunderstood in the media talking about that moment. It was part of a requirement within that bill. So that was, that was how it was phrased to us, that we should finally hold this tribal state summit.
It came about really like quietly. I think we didn't
Yes.
hear anything about it until it had happened.
Saw it in the
And like a
paper.
week later.
Yeah.
So I don't know how that could be the summit, but.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Chief Sabatis had mentioned that as well. I mean, she, thought that a summit should really be bigger than that. And, the governor actually said that she did not, she requested that the chiefs didn't bring their, councils. She just wanted the chiefs only. Which Chief Sabatis, and I agree, it was, I mean, if we want to have a summit, there's a lot more that we should have been able to talk about.
With
Should
more
have been
time.
everything, yeah.
Right.
But
You didn't create the agenda. The chief knows all her agenda.
Thank you. Yeah, so speaking of agenda, we got a lot of
Yes,
agenda,
sorry,
short
yeah.
on time.
The quick one, the next one is the amendment to the main constitution. We basically published the whole constitution, including Article 10, Section 5, with treaty responsibilities. And then Judd Estes Kendall drafted an article on Peter Newell and his case to where he attempted to enforce the treaty rights. So it's a really interesting article, and I've included it in here. He's not finished with it yet. He's going to be conferring with history professor Micah Pauling on that. So talking to each other.
Where's this likely to be published?
It's not published anywhere. It's in your materials
Yeah,
here.
no, I've got it. I'm just wondering where he's headed with that.
I mean, it'll be on our website, but I was chatting with him. I thought, can this turn into some kind of a journal article or? Bit, what he do? He did a little more work on it, got a law student to help with. Yeah, the question that, he was asking Micah about was whether, that this case was really brought kind of as a test case versus, Peter was hungry and he just went hunting because he needed food, but it seemed like there was more strategy behind it. So that's kind of what they're exploring. So we already talked about block grant funding and then learning the principles and practical application of UNDRIP and tribal state relations. That was on your list. I'm not sure what anything's happened with that, or
Right.
it's just something you want to continue to mention or provide education on the website about.
Yeah, I could comment on that. I mean, that's been for a while now, kind of a standing thing that we try to incorporate reference to the UN Declaration in, various things that we submit or that we create. So it's not new. It's been a MITSC thing for a while to try to mention UNDRIP as much as possible, and particularly the basic principles of UNDRIP, and also to remind the folks that the Maine legislature endorsed the UN Declaration. So that's what that's about.
Then there was a request to promote sharing of tribal state criminal history information. I understood it to enhance our protections.
Yeah, I don't know that, I don't know if that's. I don't know what I was thinking about the state, the chief of police at Pleasant Point was saying, but I can't remember what he said now. It's been a while.
There's been pushback historically about not airing dirty laundry is not what it's been
Yeah.
put. But I think if it was understood that, because I think it leads to enhanced penalties. Cases are treated differently if there's been a prior conviction.
But I could check with him again.
So I would need to look into what it's necessary. Did you want to speak to this?
Sure.
The need is.
Yeah, I can actually. So this has been sort of a longstanding effort. It's actually a requirement of the implementing act that the tribal courts submit this criminal history information over to the State Bureau of Information. It's in the sections of the implementing act that deal with tribal court jurisdiction. And so these were amendments that were added in the VAWA, the mini state VAWA compromise that was reached that allowed tribal courts to prosecute non-Indian defendants for certain crimes of domestic violence when the victim was a member of a tribe. And so part of those amendments also included a requirement for the tribes to submit criminal history record information to the State Bureau of Information. That hasn't gotten off the ground. There's been several meetings and attempts over the past 4 years to kind of affect this. Had conversations with Chief Judge Eric Maynard at the Penobscot Nation and about this topic. My understanding is that there have been some funding issues, but there is also obviously this is part of the VAWA bill because it was in part a safety issue as well. So in part because, sometimes there are convictions that can be firearms disqualifying. And so that's why it was also part of the VAWA efforts in order to protect persons. I'm not just going to say women, I'm going to say protect persons because it applies to all persons in certain relationships. So I there's like two issues, right? There's sort of a short-term problem, right? And then there's obviously like a long-term solution. In terms of trying to come up with a short-term fix, I think the State Bureau of Information is more than willing to talk to whoever they need to talk to at from each tribe in order to create a really an analog way to get information about criminal convictions that can be entered into the State Bureau of Information. By the way, the SBI, all this information the state gets also hooks up with federal databases as well. So there's been a short-term, sort of like an analog, sort of like, is there some sort of piece of paper that can be sent to the State Bureau of Information, and what information needs to be included on that piece of paper that then they can enter manually into the system. So that's sort of like a short-term fix in order to start this information flowing. And then the longer-term fix is a way to try and get the information automatically transmitted into the system. And that is certainly a funding problem. Would require, a capacity for each tribal court to connect with the state systems. That's what happens on the state side now. All of this information, it gets transmitted automatically from police departments or from the state system. All this information will go directly to SBI. So that is the sort of, if there's been fits and starts, it seems to be like, we'll try and set up a meeting and have a conversation, and then other things take precedence. And I understand that, and everyone understands that. We're just trying to move this forward in order to sort of fill this gap that we have. Because as my understanding is, and I would be happy to be incorrect, is that there is really a 40-year gap in criminal history record information, so that the tribal courts have not been reporting any convictions out of the tribal courts into federal or state databases for 40 years.
And maybe I can talk to you at some length after this, because we started to do this, and there was actually a definition of state by state statute said, with SBI could only take state records. So they didn't want our records. So we ended up having to do a workaround through the Secretary of State's office. So we can talk, because there's a federal tribal access program that might have some money to help give them. It's just like the machinery. So
Yeah.
If I understand, I think you used the magic word funding. There is federal money available to help the tribes do whatever needs to be done to bring this process up to date, but somebody has to apply for it. I got that right?
It went pretty far down the road with the tribal access project. It's called through DOJ. So I don't know how far they got.
And I'm sorry, if I may, are we in peril of running afoul of anything with the federal government if we don't fix this sooner rather than later? Is there a penalty involved?
Not that I'm aware of.
That doesn't mean we can forget
It's a
it.
public safety and victim protection issue. They're just not getting all the protection they could. So we can talk more about that. And then next one is monitoring efforts to the return of state lands to tribes. Especially a certain parcel, east branch of the Penobscot River. Have you all been talking about that? I think I found it somewhere in discussions. Is this something that we should be doing, or is there another entity?
Anybody want to start that? Or shall I keep going? There was a bill introduced by Ben Collins, either last session or the session before, that would have created a commission to survey lands and waters of significant or sacred value to the tribes owned by the state. And when that bill came up for hearing, people looked at MITSC. And I think the bill was tabled at that time because Collings had not gotten the assent or consent of the tribes, even though it was in their interest. And they sort of pushed it aside and said, maybe MITSC can look into that. That's the general issue apart from the tracks on the East Branch. I can't remember what further action we've taken on it, but I know I've commented to people that, hey, you don't need a whole commission on this. You just need a couple of people to go talk to whoever the state property records people are and find out what they've got, find out what the tribes need. Push it the next step.
There were a couple of individuals at the Wabanaki market. He had a table, and I think he said he was working for the Natural Resources Council, even though he's a tribal member.
Like essentially the state entity that has the list of state-owned land.
Yes.
When I was DAX commissioner, I looked for that and realized there was no such thing. And then we started an effort to seek out and produce a list of what does the state own. And it was a fascinating exercise going through different agencies, bureaus, departments, and realizing no one knew the comprehensive answer.
DOT has a highway information.
This one's got that. And it was quite an exercise.
Is there a list now? Has it actually been?
Well, we made progress, I would say, and hopefully folks have picked it up from there and completed it. But I like your natural assumption that there must be a central list somewhere. Of course there would be.
And you call on the Commissioner of State Land.
Right. You're right. Sorry about that.
No, that's really interesting. So,
Bert?
Yeah, is this the same, I know they mentioned, was that it? The 31,000 acres on the East Branch. Is that the same thing that there was an article just recently about this? Now, I don't know if this is the same plot of land.
No, it's different.
it's a different on.
Oh, it is. Well, dang, turn it back over to us.
Right, send it back.
And then the last thing under this particular basket is collaborating with the permanent commission, and Rachel has been communicating with them.
Yeah, and I'm conscious of the time, because we have like half an hour left,
Yeah.
so I can report after that meeting, but we have a meeting set up, so.
Thank you. So we'll move that. Next one. Okay, yeah, we are Right, I'm pushing it hard here.
I'm hoping we can we
Um,
can make sure to discuss future meeting dates in this meeting.
Yes, yeah,
Just this, this was a draft article, by Judd. Is he asking for our input? Is that what he's
Sure,
saying?
he's helped you take some, yeah.
Okay, cool. I mean, it's awesome.
It's still, yeah, it's a working.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it though.
so I think number 8, we've discussed a lot of
Yeah,
that,
we
right?
did, yeah.
We covered 7 and 8 kind of together there,
There's a chart in your materials.
okay. And then,
Yeah.
Adopting, MITSC legislative project.
Yeah, if I could jump in on that, I do think 8 and 9 flow together at this point, and the picture is a little different, I think, than we might have thought. I think there's 2 pieces here. One, over the longer term, I think, the commission needs to address developing a process, setting a process in place over the long term for how MITSC can effectively interact with the legislative schedule. But in the short term, especially in light of some of the comments that have already been made today by Kim and others, we've got it seems like we've got a very short time frame in this session. And I think at this point, I'll defer to Jill, but I think it's important now at this meeting that there be some clear direction in terms of how the staff should be approaching, the upcoming legislative session. We don't have a huge number of bills. Unlike a first session, we have a relatively smaller number of bills that have been carried over. But I do think there's a need for the commissioners to provide structure or direction so that Jill, has, the direction and authorization she needs to act effectively regarding the pending bills.
Sure. So Paul, what about reinstituting our informal legislative committee that was meeting
Well,
bi-weekly?
on the document that was sent to you, that was one of the things that was included there, but that document was drafted more in terms of like an ongoing process rather than just this short-term issue that we have with respect to this session. So, yeah, I mean, I think that is one way to deal with it, is to recreate or revitalize that committee. And then to clarify what you want the process to be so that Jill knows, and Jill, I'm speaking for you here. I should
Yeah.
defer to you on this. I just think, from my own experience, I'm saying I think Jill needs some structure and direction here as this legislature session
Right,
approaches.
and I was gonna say that I would defer to her as well in terms of like, what do you need in terms of like, what we had in the past was like a Friday afternoon legislative update, basically. Informal, but informative.
Looks like a number of bills have to be written and decided by the end of January. It's hardly any time at all.
Right.
So I wonder if you should prioritize which of the bills you really want to weigh in substantively on. And then I suppose I could draft an outline of what the position would be. And you could review the testimony ahead of time.
Mhm.
So I'm thinking of Wabanaki Studies Bill. I'm worried about that all landing on our plate. in particular.
The Wabanaki Study Bill, I think, 2007,
Right.
is worth looking at as well. I mean, we provided MITSC input on 1626, so it's only appropriate.
So yeah, I
And
think
2004 as well.
Paul had put in here that where MITSC has taken a position before, and basically to repeat that position. So there's things that reappear in 2007 that were been supportive of, continue to do that.
What else?
So if you wanted to meet like next Friday, we could do that.
Who's on the legislative? committee?
Well, I think anybody who wanted to come on,
I think it's me, Zeke, Darren, and somebody whose term has expired.
Correct.
And just, if I may, I mean, the problem we're grappling with here is statute says we're supposed to report to the legislature, and that has evolved into a point where the legislature kind of expects MITSC to be there as its house, advisors on Indian matters. But because we only meet as a full group quarterly, and the legislature revises everything overnight, it's impossible for us to stay current as a full
Up to date,
commission. And I think where we're sort of headed is the formation of a standing committee that would meet, weekly or as needed during the legislative session, and it would act to absorb prior wisdom of MITSC without actually formulating completely new policies. But it's always going to be difficult because things will always come.
Right. So I think we were meeting on Fridays every week, was it, or every other?
I don't think it's
Weekly.
every other sentence.
Yes.
That's right.
Every other?
Say you want to be on it?
I was on.
Should we just
You didn't include me.
invite everybody, whoever can make it?
Whoever can make it, yeah. I would say it's,
Nothing wrong with that.
non-exclusive.
When the legislature's in session, I don't think it would be unreasonable to send out an email, once every week, a couple of weeks, and these are the big things coming up. If anybody wants to have a voice in it, you can.
If there were a standing time, but do we want to try and figure that out now, or should we email about that?
I think we should email it and move
Okay.
on.
Okay.
That sounds good. That would take one more time, yeah. We'll follow up.
So number 10 says resubmission.
That's the question, that there's other
Okay.
things that,
All right, all right.
because of lack
great.
of certifications.
And
And 11 goes with 10.
11 is including the travel certifications. Then, number 12. Change the name.
Where did this come from?
Do you want to talk or do you want?
Well, it came from two different places.
Yeah, I mean, I think there was discussion among staff about the idea of improving upon the name Maine Indian Tribal State Commission possibly. And that there could be a way to do that and keep MITSC and MITSC. So there was a suggestion of what about in the
Intergovernmental.
future, looking at changing the name to Maine Intergovernmental Tribal State
There's
Commission.
no I in MITSC. Team.
So, yeah, I mean, Indian can be seen as being offensive. It's perpetuating Columbus's mistake and that they came and they were too lazy to learn the names of the people that were there, so. just call them Indians.
Would require legislation to amend the act.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So would that dovetail or fall under the offensive name effort
Good.
Ooh,
Yeah.
that's a thought.
Yeah.
rather than a whole separate bill?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so the Place Justice Action Committee, which is the ones that are drafted a bill to address offensive place names. It wouldn't include anything like this. It was more procedural, how to restructure the office in order to even tackle these questions. It didn't make the word Indian offensive.
Okay,
You know.
so it would take a separate bill
Right.
to amend the act.
I would think it would anyway, right?
Yes, it
It's a
would. I think
huge-
it would.
It was
yeah.
a huge,
That would be a big
I
deal.
mean, if I could, I mean, it could be added to 2007 as a one-line change that got included in 2007.
Doesn't amend, yeah.
Yeah, I just feel like 2007 is gonna be such a big bill and it's gonna be controversial that it might not go forward and then we wouldn't get
right,
the change.
or that could hinder 2007 as well.
Well, the thought is, I mean, the idea obviously is if there's a vehicle an existing vehicle or something that it could tag, it would make sense. Would avoid having to go in with a second session emergency piece of legislation, which is a little bit higher hurdle than if you could just develop an amendment and attach it to something. So
Yeah.
I hadn't realized that it was the use of the term Indian. Defensive. I thought the reason for the proposed name change might be just the redundancy in the existing.
I thought that too.
What is it?
I thought when I saw this item on the agenda, I said, "Hey, what's that about? Why do they want to change it?" And I thought it might be because the existing name, Maine Indian Tribal State Commission, is redundant, including both Indians and tribal. But no, apparently it's the sentiment that the use of the word Indian is going to be offensive.
I did think it was redundant as well. Did strike me.
Yeah,
The
Okay,
National
indigenous.
Association of English Majors.
we might have to figure that out too as well in terms of like, so the acronym change. That's okay too.
I would say indigenous. That way it doesn't change.
Yeah, but I think, I mean, Bob, you bring up an interesting point. I mean, part of the reason why the permanent commission is named as it is, I mean, there's the difference between tribal populations and indigenous populations. There are people living here in the state that aren't Wabanaki from all sorts of tribes all over the country. And this MITSC doesn't deal with any of them. It's just the tribes.
Then why not use our traditional collective name, Wabanaki? And I'm with Newell. If the acronym has to change, so be it. Because it should reflect who we see ourselves as. And I think that the state needs to start being more cognizant of that. And I for one, I'm glad it's happening.
So to follow up, if I could, on what Sandy just said, it could just become the Maine Wabanaki Commission.
Well, you'd have to involve the state because they're there too. So,
That's the word Maine.
oh, yeah, that's true.
Maine Wabanaki Intergovernmental Commission.
And
The
what,
Wabanaki ampersand Maine Commission.
Well, yeah, email us your thoughts. on this.
Yeah, I mean, are you interested? I guess that's the first thing we needed was that you're interested in, somehow
Yeah.
dropping
I
Indian.
think, I think there is some interest.
Maybe the next time we could, or send us your ideas. And
We'll move it up on the agenda.
workshop it, period.
Mhm.
And then we already talked about fishing.
Yes, I think fishing has been covered by Robert, so that's really awesome. And then I don't know even what that says here.
The
MITSC,
The logo.
the logo.
MITSC brand guide.
No, well,
We might not have time, I don't know if we're time
This
for
week,
that, but
yeah.
do you wanna talk about the logo?
Yeah, the logo here was,
Yeah, I can pass.
if you look at the present logo, it's, because we're doing so much with the website and more publications and things, it's really kind of cluttered. And we're hoping to find something that's a little more streamlined. And so those were the proposals, maybe to look at, using the Wabanaki Confederacy, kind of like when all the tribes got together, that symbol that appears a lot. Or to, maybe you can put the three symbols, but if the nation
Yeah.
wanted to join, then that would be four, then that would be really crowded. So.
I'd like to
question
say
is-
something.
Yes.
So, I saw that the design, which incorporated the Confederacy symbol. But, the thing is I'm not so sure about that because the way, if it shows up on there, it's almost as if we are including the state of Maine within the Wabanaki Confederacy. And, the Confederacy is made up of nations, Wabanaki nations. So, I would hesitate on agreeing well, actually, I won't agree with the use of the Confederacy symbol, there, personally, but that's, that wouldn't be my call, I guess. But I just have this personal feeling about the use of that symbol. I agree with having the different, symbols, referring to specific nations, the different nations involved here. And if the Mi'kmaq decide to be a part of this body, then we would insert them on there as well. But as far as the Confederacy symbol, I'd have to say no.
Yeah, I think that's compelling. I kind of agree there. I mean, just stylistically, looking at that image of the Wabanaki Confederacy within the state of Maine, Wabanaki Confederacy is a lot bigger than just the state of Maine. I mean, just stylistically, just looking at it. Also includes the Abenaki as well. So, from a historical that symbol.
I think, Zeke, it was you who warned us a couple of meetings ago that the double curve designs on the existing logo may not in fact be those of the three tribes.
I brought up that I had no idea what those were.
I actually researched that.
I don't know. Do you know?
Yeah, I actually researched it. I mean, if these are where they come from the spec book, double curve motif. So, yeah, Maliseet, Passamaquoddy, Penobscot. So it's on page
So that's,
34.
so those symbols are what's on the current.
Yes, yeah,
Yes.
that's why I just wanted to know where they came from. and
Those
what they
would
meant.
change and they are correct.
Right, at least that's what spec said.
What if you keep the individual symbols? And you can drop the state geographic outline, eliminate that. And then just take the state seal that's in the original and the individual tribal symbols.
Yeah, I mean,
Just
any ideas, I
Drop
think,
the state.
at this point should be on the table.
This is
Those
called,
4 symbols, may potentially go in 5.
this is called for a committee.
Yeah, I don't think we're at, like, I think this is an idea that's being presented for
Right.
further discussion. I don't.
But it
think
did
it's
get
a
some
thought yet.
traction both online and here as well. So
Yeah,
I think
so
it's something
certainly
worth
any
pursuing.
ideas,
Mhm.
again,
Yeah.
We're just looking for something that was simple and recognizable.
Mhm. Send your design in, Sandra.
I will. I have a question, actually.
Uh-huh.
Why are we using a symbol of the Ojibwe people?
The dream
Right?
catcher.
Why are we using a symbol that belongs to to another tribe as our own? We are not known, Wababanig, we're not known for making dream catchers historically. It feels very
Back on the original.
The feathers.
yeah, I can't tell you what it feels like because it's not polite.
Oh,
But the Anishinaabe people, that's theirs, not ours. I find it to be it's almost like stereotypical Indian kind of stuff, and that offends me.
Lynn.
I did look up where dream catchers are sort of mostly affiliated with, and it is the Ojibwe people. I worked with the Mille Lacs Band for 3 years, and we're actually their ancestors. So I thought, well, maybe that's why it was included. But I would agree with you, it's sort of a pan-Indian symbol.
Yeah, and I don't know, it's tacky for us because it's not ours. Lynn?
I would say it's maybe a sunrise rather than the dream catcher.
Dawnland.
Mhm.
That's nice.
We are Wabanaki, people of the first
Oh.
light, people of the dawn.
Bert,
Write that down.
Kev?
I said, good call. Chiguha.
Wow, Willie one.
Well, like I said, send in, if you have something, send it in and then we'll all bring it back and talk about more about it and maybe find a place either legislatively, how we move it forward, or maybe we don't do anything, maybe it stays the same.
I do want to thank you, Jill, for putting in the effort to do the research prior to. I think that's very important. And what are the thoughts around maybe using those traditional symbols to mark our reservations?
Oh, on the map?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then a little teeny tiny one,
Mhm.
almost invisible to the naked eye for this state. No, I'm kidding. But to put the state's logo in the Augusta area and to put ours in our areas.
No, we make the state of Maine symbol tiny. So you can barely
Exactly.
see it.
Exactly. Invisible to the naked eye. Kidding.
What do our state commissioners
Yeah.
think about this?
I'm prepared to defer largely to the tribal reps on this because unless you get to the point of shrinking the state unfairly somehow in the logo, I would nod. I would be interested to know what is the cultural significance of these double curved displays. I mean, am I asking a stupid question there? I mean, they're
No,
lovely, but
there's a lot of significance. I wish I could tell you. I'm not sure. But there are people who can tell you.
is this limited to the Wabanaki tribes or is it pan Indian?
Oh, it's definitely Wabanaki, but you know,
Wabanaki tribes, yeah.
it's almost like a language in and of itself.
So I
There's
would,
one for unity and gatherings.
so I would ask online in here also, Richard, submit your ideas to Rachel.
Or
Rachel
both
and
of
Jill.
us, or, yeah,
Yeah,
either of
okay, right,
us, yeah,
Well,
We might-
we'll all be on the email.
yeah.
So we could come up with something that's completely new too. So like if you want to include the sunrise, so I had actually thought about that. I thought about a pine tree for Maine because they're changing their flag, right?
I think so.
I'll get it in the flag.
I know. I know, one drawn by a crayon.
So what's the second part of that sentence? MITSC brand guy.
Oh, I don't think we have time for that now, so
Okay.
maybe we put that on the
Bring it
next
back?
meeting agenda, yeah.
It's, what it is that with publications going forward, you kind of want to have a style guide.
Oh,
So
okay.
what colors do you use? What fonts do you use? So everything's consistent. So Rafi developed one, it's fairly extensive. And so that's on our website, so we could send you the link.
Yeah,
And I guess we wanted to make sure if you approved it, then we would go ahead with it.
Okay.
Is there a general resource for the double curve designs?
Pardon?
Frank specs double curve motif. You know, it's on the,
it's in, do you have the packet,
Yeah.
Bob?
Yep.
yeah, it's on the second to last page.
Oh, yes, that thing in the 4-point type. Thank you.
Well, on
Yeah.
the one before it
I
is.
got
A quick question, I don't want to reopen the discussion, but going back to the name. LD 2007. So I know there's no content because it's all being negotiated. But is it an anticipation that there will be a MITSC in that bill?
I don't know.
You don't know.
2007?
Is that, have I got the right number?
That's the new one,
That's the new LD for the yet to be released big bill.
1626.
So it's 16, remind me again, 1626 was MITSC?
That was the task force recommendations that were included.
It's what I'm getting at is, if MITSC goes away in the full, if the new initiative is fully implemented and MITSC is extinguished, then that's one thing. If it continues in a form, then it would seem you would want that bill to include the new name.
Is there a move to extinguish MITSC?
I've lost track.
Not in 1626 that I was aware of, I feel like there was actually, MITSC was mentioned, correct, Paul, in that bill?
Yeah, they there was mention of MITSC and there was no provision about removing the, 6212 from the statute.
If the vision is that it goes forward in one form or another, then you could have that bill, 2007, also include name change. That's what I'm getting
Plant
at.
a seed anyway, it might not pass this time.
It might not pass, but
But
it
you
would be a
feel it out.
logical place to put,
Maybe an easy way to get, tribal leadership effective on it.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
but that might be a vehicle
Mhm.
to insert it.
I'll just drop this footnote that it might be appropriate for us in our next meeting to consider what we might recommend to the tribes and legislature to do with MITSC in any reform bill. Do we want to keep it just like it is, or name a czar, like, or just a thought that doesn't require a response, but I have no vested interest in, since none of us is compensated for this, we don't really have any commissioners.
You could get $75 for that, which is better than the jury fee, 15.
I know it's still. We don't need to stay, like something cast in stone, we can reinvent ourselves.
Right. Well, and that's the thing with the logo, right? Reinvent.
Or just-
If the acronym changes, the acronym changes.
So when is the next meeting?
That's a good question. So
When do you put these things on?
next meeting date and agenda. I think we should be,
You're the one who calls the meetings.
it seems like we have a lot to do, so I would maybe suggest meeting in January.
I agree.
Just as a staff person, I'm wondering, are we intending to keep the same second Friday of the month for the upcoming year? So I think it would be helpful to know, I know it'd be helpful for me to know the meeting schedule of the whole year.
We can knock it out.
Yeah. Cause I don't wanna book a gig or something.
Well, also should talk about venue as well, right?
Yeah.
MITSC used to alternate venue from tribal communities.
I used to go back and forth between, like, tribal community, state, different communities, but then also somewhere in the state, just to, I mean, we could do something down in Bucksport where Richard's at, maybe at his house or something.
Absolutely.
If I could jump in for a second, the latest iteration of that, correct me if I'm wrong, Rachel, but I think it was decided last year that we would try to focus on the 3 counties where the tribal communities happen to be located: Washington, Penobscot, and Aroostook. I do believe that's what was the last decision.
Yeah, we had talked about alternating between like the Mitchell Center, Cobscook, and trying to get a meeting at the Mound Seat tribal
Not on
offices.
Friday.
But that was, the Friday was the problem, and then now that we're doing hybrid meetings and everyone's relying on that, we need to make sure whatever facility we're using has that technology
Capability.
and a person to help make sure it goes smoothly.
Just to pose a question, it sounds as though there was a lot of discussion that a lot of people around in this table might be in Augusta in January. So if you're talking about January, would you want to hold it in Augusta? I mean, if you
Yeah.
might be in Augusta, you might be in Augusta.
Might need to look at it.
I mean,
Legislative council too.
do you want to just hold it down there because of the concentration of everything that's going to be going on with the hearings?
Yeah, we'll have to just figure out a location.
I agree with Richard.
Sorry.
That's, if I could comment, yeah, we did that few years ago, we did that. We had some tech issues, as I recall, but there were, I think, several rooms, available within the state complex that, we might be able to use.
Shooting for
So-
January 12th.
The Department of Transportation has really good technology.
Great to know, thank you.
And we also had a meeting, I think, at the Senator Inn also, but not sure, how you feel about that, but
Yeah, the Mitchell Center kindly is letting us, we're not paying them for this facility. They're extremely generous. That, I don't know how much you want to factor that in.
Somewhere in Augusta.
Oh, I bet you was trying to free them.
Okay.
Maybe say on 12th.
So Paul, does Jill have your mailing address?
Uh,
Or I should
No.
just ask Jill.
I think so. Pat has it, I know that.
That sounds nice, but we have to be back and forth, I don't stay there, so hypothetically, if nothing's happening on the 12th, then that would be quite a long drive. But Zoom is fine, I'll just zoom in. And at any point, next week, I'm gonna have a newborn baby, so I probably won't be traveling anyway.
Okay, yeah.
Mhm.
We check the legislative calendar too, to schedule it.
So if we were to meet in Holton on Friday, could we do that?
Yeah, yeah, it's a simple process to book the space, yeah. And Fridays are good days, we've encountered this problem before, Fridays are good days because it's closed, but that also means you don't, meet anyone. That's, I don't know if that's the point.
Well,
Is that coming
yeah,
into our space?
well, that's true, right, so like when we used to have the travel meetings, like at Dubai, the ones I attended, where, I mean, there was people, more than one in the audience.
Yeah.
There's people on Zoom, I'm sure, or on the YouTube channel.
Can you tell how many people joined?
I'm sure we could look at how many people have watched the video
Okay.
too, yeah.
Hopefully there, people are watching.
January 12th in Augusta,
If they,
Friday. And then thereafter, somewhere in Vulcan. Unless you want to switch the day you meet. Yeah.
like this is-
Yeah, we're closed on Friday, so if
Right.
we have it on Friday, even if you didn't want.
But your tech person could be available to help on
Yeah.
Friday?
Well, no, but we can set up on Thursday and then that's what we were planning to do last time. Fine.
Okay, yeah, I'm just not, like, I would be daunted running this thing that Carol has going by myself. I can set up a Zoom.
Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, a day other than Friday, if you want to hold it at HPMI.
Can we switch the day?
We can.
Sure.
I guess the question, Sandy, are you still on and like do days other than Fridays work for you, or was Friday the best day? I can't remember.
Yeah, and thank you for that accommodation early on, for switching it to Fridays. I am now working in another location within Wabanaki, and so my schedule is much different. And I also work on Fridays and Saturdays at a restaurant with my son. So if we could switch the day of the week, I would be more than amenable. Because I'm supposed to be at the restaurant at noon on Fridays. So,
Which restaurant is this, Sandy? Is it Craig?
yes, yep.
Old Orchard?
No, he moved back to help his girlfriend's mom save her failing restaurant. Oh, sorry, was I supposed to say that out loud?
Where?
In Eastport. Yep. But yeah, I'm good for any other day of the week now.
Okay, good to know. I don't know if we have time. It's pretty convenient with everyone present. Does anyone have a day that they would prefer than Fridays?
Ring and seeing.
Not Tuesdays.
Not Tuesday.
Oh, and Rachel, I wanted to add as well, I really like your idea. We should strive toward getting a calendar where our meetings are scheduled for an entire year,
Mm-hmm.
including location. I really like, I'm very big on structure. Never mind, never mind, Newell. No comments from you, but it would be really good to know, that consistently the second Tuesday of every month, or however it gets, shaken out, that a calendar be created and shared with the entire commission.
Mm-hmm.
We could do a proposed calendar, send it out.
Yeah.
How people do it. And you're meeting quarterly?
No, we've been meeting every other month,
Yeah.
Oh.
but then we even met more frequently, I feel like, in the legislative session, when the
Yeah.
legislature's in session. But the last year, we met every other month.
So if we start in January, we go on March, May.
Yeah. You know. But,
Motion to adjourn? Motion to adjourn?
yeah, motion to adjourn.
Yes.
All right.
We're gonna cut our
See
connection.
everyone.
Rachel?
Yes, we'll go do that.
See you.
Good to meet you, Kim.
Ah, it was nice to
Don't
meet you
forget
as
to
well.
give me
Yeah.
your-
And maybe we'll see you around sometime. So did you come for work or just curiosity?
So did we adjourn or what?
Okay.
Yeah.
What's that?
Do you need one of these?
I got one.
Did we adjourn or what?
Yes,
It's
we
a
did.
travel expense reimbursement.
Oh, okay,
I gotta give Brandon Staley a call.
Not part of your job.
Yeah, yeah.
all right, well, bye, everybody.
See you.
He got fired.
Nice.
Let me know where.
Burn.
Did
Did you hear me?
Yeah, I didn't quite know what.
What?
I said Brandon got fired.
And hopes your
Good.
baby is. Easy one.
At
Shut up.
halftime-
I
At
think- I think
halftime,
they-
at halftime last
Is
night.
it a first?
I think they should have hired.
You got fined at halftime.
Take a long
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Well, either way, they're on.
Where you-
Well,